To test the will of man, trials have been set, challenges arranged strangely, doors without hinges hidden, the dice have been cast, the hand dealt. Masters of game have deigned to ordain the distribution of puzzle pieces without pity. We are old forms that must learn new skills. Are you clever enough to find the answers? Can you fathom what is not meant to be, know what is unknown, to solve the unsolvable, in order to put rhyme to reason and reason to riddle? And should the walls cave and the floor fall from beneath your feet, you must remember one repeating truth that echoes in the chamber of enigma. There is always a way, just as there are angels in puzzles only glitches can reveal. Exoterica, Puzzle Planet. May all your leaves gather, might they wither, may all your branches bear fruit, may your sides stay ever sharp, forevermore and ever. Safe travels, happy hunting, and remember, do not look back. Master Word Hunting Song. What is the best route to take, the correct direction to go? What are the right words to say, the tune to play, the song to sing? Where can you find the thread of opportunity, and how hard to pull it? To what do the tracks lead? The signs in nature, the omens and totems. What do they mean? How can you understand your dreams? How can you find the path to victory? Every situation has its opponents, options and opportunities, incidents and coincidence. There is, in every scene and episodic encounter, the way to optimize the procedure to reach the desired outcome, or to mitigate consequence from mistakes or misfortune. Those doors in the long hotel hallway of possibility that are closed to you, how do you unlock them? How do you bend the situation to your favor, of cause and effect, to see which rooms are available in a given situation and their diverging branches of action and reaction? How do you open those doors closed to you, the ones with no walls, the ones without handles, the ones without rooms? Speak the master word. What if you can say the right words that implant the ideas you want to convey, to convince others, to break the ice and tension, to get the gears turning, to turn the light on inside? How can you draw out opponents into dropping their guard, or to mediate a conflict into a satisfactory resolution, or to slip out of trouble, to speak with silver tongue and release hidden options, to rouse the downtrodden with fire again, the words that reveal someone's heart, to make them know they have been seen? What was it like to be a saga poet in the court of a tyrant who would behead any that insulted him? How can you, as a spinner of tales, still insult him without losing your head? More than that, how can you jest on his behalf and get him to laugh alongside you? How can you entertain someone who has set out to use and destroy you, turn it around in your favor, earn his trust or befriend him, to turn enemies into allies? When the situation is a razor blade thin tightrope, how can you do stunts across the ravine? Indeed, surviving is not enough, because what is life if you cannot dance on its edge? If you cannot do tricks in the trade, sleight of hand in the deal, haggling in transaction, mastering the word, singing on the hunt, then you have missed the nesting dolls. In this den of thieves, do you not want to be the bandit king? The game is called surviving, this game of life, the game of hunt or be hunted, the game of victory, the game of puzzles, navigation and tracking, storytelling and wit, cunning and guile, dexterity and courage. The talents and skills you acquire, develop, hone are your weapons, tools. You compensate for weaknesses or find solutions to balance them. You lean into areas of interest, passion, and what you have the knack for, the aptitude, a steady hand and a sharp, discerning eye for. But all of life uses weapons. The tools, adaptations between poison and venom, predation and counter-predation, camouflage and traps, fangs and claws, parasitism and virus, mimicry and mutualism. The religion of nature, it might be called, is summarized as the motif found throughout hunting and foraging cultures. The lord or mistress of the animals, the masters of game. Game refers to the social, ecological, historical, moral, religious survival, a territory, the entire gamut of existence, the cycle of the seasons, the essence of predation, skill, the laws of the land, the cultural traditions. The masters or mistresses of this game are deities that protect, allocate, and establish the rules of hunting and foraging, determining the season's distribution of animals, awarding boons and delivering punishment alike. These protector deities are not masters in the sense of dominance or ownership, but immortal protectors or caretakers of a particular species or region of land, giving rise to the motifs such as the heart of a jungle, or the will of the mountain, or the guardian of this animal, or that plant, or sea, or river, or rock. It's the lord of the forest, king of the sea, mistress of the harvest. The masters of game would guide the hunter to success if they were in alignment, or failure if they were breaching a taboo, such as mistreating the animal or other community members, or overhunting, or in some way violating or abusing an aspect of nature. Depending on the scope or scale, simple failure of hunting or foraging, to injury, interpersonal issues with their people, or disease, drought, infertility of soil, and other forms of strife. The spirit of the animal to be hunted would report to the master of the animal how it was treated by the hunter. The animals come back again and again, and the memory is maintained, the story transferred. This understanding of nature and reality is not only ubiquitous to the whole world for hundreds of thousands of years of hunter and foraging peoples, but is also found in other animal peoples too. Wolves, deer, fish, trees. They all have to follow the game masters, because this is not just a religion of humans, it is the very religion of life, of the earth, and sun, and moon, the soul of the wild. It's in the marrow and the bones of hunters, the cycle of life, the Red Queen's game. Now the interpretations vary. Unique aspects are found from culture to culture through the thread of the oral storytelling tradition, passing on information indefinitely for millions of years. It is the lore and experience parent passes to offspring. Naturally, it adapts and evolves. The story of the land, the game masters, the history, religion, science, technique, skill, lore, senses, and names. And all those categories that have been divided were simply part of a singular collection of story songs and practical teachings. Oral tradition is not about the passage of the exact memorized piece of information from generation to generation. Writing and print literacy differs in that it suggests a need to get the words precisely right, that there are universal truths, yet the words can be interpreted and translated however is ultimately needed. The storytelling tradition transferred the spirit of the information. Children are told about the stars, about the animals, about disease, and the sea, and the life lessons, and heroes, and tips, and tricks, and it doesn't matter the precise words, but they are told in the story of the game that was taught before, though constantly updated in its application, a living, animistic story. Not a text of absolute truth, but a continuation of the story unwritten, but lived, spoken, and danced, not frozen and preserved, in the way that has been learned through a life of experience. It's organic. When people travel and as the earth and environments change, the stories change with them. Maybe a new star appears in the night, or a new species is introduced, or a great cataclysm occurs, or a legendary hero is born. The masters of game would become the deities of agriculture and pastoral humans, and from there continue to evolve into the religious depictions and spiritual understandings that exist today. All of them are based on the lord and mistress of the animals from hunter and foraging cultures, from nomadic humans that represent the vast majority of human existence. What are called microbes in microbiology are the masters and mistress of the animals that would evolve and be absorbed by settled civilization into the gods. Particular to microbes are their offensive and defensive weapons. There is a zodiac of factions who offer counters, weaknesses, strengths, and openings that one faction may expose to another. Nature is tribal. As one acclimates to an environment, they become inundated with the local microbiota, the brand of chemicals, the spirit of the surrounding ecology. They begin to think in terms of this essence, manifest traits, attributes, and characteristics. The signature of their being transforms. If one enters a faction's terrain as an enemy, to disrupt and pillage, the alignment against that faction is made known, and thus becomes an enemy, in which the spirit of the land will attack, throwing predator, disease, and misfortune so long as they remain in the territory of the warring faction. To ally with a faction may provide boons, or at least a safe passage through it. When one participates and seeks to understand the particular rule set of the terrain's game, and appeal to the game masters, is when transformation takes place on the cellular and microbial level, which leads to changes to expressions of self, personality, behavior, physical appearance. The difference between a disease and a medicine is entirely related to this interaction of factions. One's poison may be another's cure, a remedy to allies and a malady to enemies. Still, there are vast levels of complexity. One major disease may be beaten by a lesser disease. The same way one predator may find itself outclassed by the predator of an entirely different skill base. The hawk may dominate the skies and most land critters, but is easily beaten by a fox or raccoon in the right opportunity. Vultures can pick off the decomposing flesh of a carcass, yet most others would find it to be diseased. And so the factions are a categorization of game masters and their constituents, partners, protégés, apprentices, handlers, comrades that are constantly mixing, rather than kingdoms of life and phylogenetic trees, which suggest the universality of nature to exist in the labels that are given to them. A wound to one may prove to be a bandage to another. Those from the same tribe are compatible, mutualistic, commensurate, easily befriend, and communicate in familiar language, even in cases where they maintain a predator-prey dynamic. Their rituals are compatible, as are their viruses. The human may raise cattle, drink its milk, ferment it into cheese, and consume the microbial food, or slaughter the cattle and consume its flesh. The cow may graze upon the grass, and the grass supports other insects, and so this ecology loops and sustains itself in a clear faction relationship, where one, if treated properly, actively surrenders to the next in the cycle. When disease or predator or dysregulation occurs, the faction is disrupted and must mobilize itself to the defense. A natural microbial barrier in one organism is a carrier of disease to another. The cow infected by disease may be completely subsumed by another faction, or simply a bull with a temperament opposed to human practices may seek to join another faction. Should the humans mistreat the cattle, the masters of game which seize this imbalance of one of their own will retaliate against the human. The meat loses its value, the milk will spoil, the digestive microbiota of the human will begin to repel these food sources. The human may find themselves sick, unable to digest familiar food, breaking out in skin conditions and general immunological issues. They begin to split into different factions, the cow into one, the human in another. That marks a betrayal of trust, a breach in the injunctions of the masters of game. The humans have aligned with a different faction, one that forces the human physiology to adapt in imbalanced ways. But all organisms exist in this way. The wolf that overhunts is dealt with by injury, turned on by fellow wolves, inflicted with disease. The crow that abuses its position will be held accountable in the crow court and massacred. Bees may seek to cure fellow sick bees, or they may remove them from the hive. Much depends on the nature of the issue, where it comes from, and whether rehabilitation is deserved or not. An ant that has breached an injunction of the masters of game may find itself outcast or executed to atone for its misconduct. An accidental breach or one made with no malicious intent may instead be offered the chance to set things right. Whether wounded, diseased, or poisoned, there are lessons to be learned, skills to acquire, cause and effect to study. Every disease is a puzzle, keys and jigsaw microbes fitting with the story of how it happened, what is currently going on, and what it will lead to. The master word is a concept which can be seen as the proper procedure, the correct course of action, the right thread taken, the password that appeals to the masters of game to safely engage in rites or interaction with a faction, even one's own faction. The master word is finding the cure to the disease, transforming the poison into medicine, surviving a wound or close encounter. It's traveling into unknown or dangerous territory and not disrupting or being a cause of dysregulation, avoiding the traps and pitfalls, using the right phrase to disarm or disengage. To slip by security, avoid scrutiny. When one is with regulation, calm, and in a state of ease and cool, there is no inflammatory reaction of the immune system and no alerting of the nearby immune systems. Take the example of nearly any animal or insect, snake, spider, bear, wasp. They do not sting or attack merely without reason. They usually are provoked or are responding to the fear of them. In a state of fear, one is unpredictable. They are dysregulated, which could mean one lashes out without thinking. Nearby organisms may preemptively strike because the air is heavy with tension. Of course, a person or animal may very well be on the hunt, or inoculated with a faction that has taken over, such as rabies or any number of parasitic fungus or protozoa. In these cases, the signs are usually outwardly noticeable, as any faction induces changes in the physiology of the host organism or landscape. Microbes, plant chemicals, immune systems, they all have strengths and defenses, allies, rivals, counters, stalemates, and they may switch tactics or their efficacy be unlocked through the right process, operation, or phrase. The master word is the ability to disarm and de-escalate, to manipulate, seduce, or in some form lower the guard or convince another organism, human, or aspect of reality. It is the dance of intimidation, hypnosis, drawing one in, diplomatically finding a solution, a speech that inspires, words that motivate, to charm, put under a spell. The word of power, speaking the soul name, it can induce catharsis and healing, or devastate and paralyze. The master word is speaking to trees, a whisperer of a skill, object, or animal. It is the one who can equally listen to the land or the process of things as well as direct it, to align with a faction, to trade or ask for safe passage, to demonstrate to an aggressive opponent why it is not in their interest to engage with you. perhaps even hiring that opponent. It is the skill, awareness, knowledge of lore and injunction, the game master's riddles in nature. Regulation is universally found in the hunting song, or it is the fishing song, farming song, weaving song, forging song, building song, battle song. The activity being acted in contains an equal potential of success and optimal regulation. The game masters pervade all things, sublime in their ubiquity across animal and object, idea and construct. The song is the enjoyment of doing, the thrill of the hunt, of the activity, to revel in the craft, creation, or destruction. It is whistling in the dark, dancing on the hot coals, smiling in the face of death. All hunting and nomadic cultures have this tradition of song that seeks to regulate both hunter and prey, both doer and receiver. Whether in hunting deer or fishing, fashioning cloth, painting illustration, or constructing building, harvesting crop, or fermenting food, whatever the art form, the song is to be imbued, blessed and consecrated by will of fire, by trial of arms, by the spirit of activity that rewards the doer. The smith god, the lord of the forest, the king of the river, the queen of the hunt, the great weaver, the master architect, the harvest deity, god of the ferment. They guide the arrow true, the hammer strike, the flourish of the brush, the needle through the thread, the reel in the fishing line, the net in the trap, the stars aligning, the path that opens up, the line of deliverance. And so the deer is calm and the meat is not triggered into tents and ordered to be diseased by the masters of game. The steel is made pure, the fish is healthy, and the harvest is bountiful. The textile is without knots, the painting is immaculate, the brew is medicinal. All the things done can be done to their best, most regulated, with support of the faction leaders, the game masters, the essence of rhymes and reasons that exist in nature, the luck and spirit of success. The signature is meant to be given personality, humor, bravery, stylized into the sign of your being. At the moment of the kill or the final strike, the finishing flourish, recognition and acknowledgement is shared between hunter and hunted, and understanding between souls take place. One is to die, and its light join with the victor, while its body is to rejoin the stars in the sky above. The language spoken is this hunting song, praise for the thrill of the battle, seeking forgiveness at the necessity of such a battle, offering respect and praise to the hunted for its brilliance and its proud lineage and a fight well fought, and of course the permission from the masters of game to say to one another, "You are a worthy adversary." The death is not in vain, and the hunter will live life to the fullest so as to make a celebration of nature's tragic web. Without hunting songs, only trauma exists, and the cycle is repeated from one agonizing death to the next, a guilty craft. In order to learn these, you must be experienced in trials, to know the price of things and who repays them. Read the faction rules, to bring novelty to the old and old to new. Never settle, for complacency is akin to death. You learn the songs by doing, by failing and accumulating advantages from discovery. Never underestimate your adversaries, never turn your back on friends, never surrender, and never look back. The world exists. Its beating pulse can be felt, and like drums you can beat with it. Feel the word, pay respect to the masters, but do not rely on any preconceived notion. They are not pleased by cowards, yet understand that even the coward is capable of the greatest heroism. Battle amuses the gods, so battle you must bring. Excellence is splendor in the house of pride, and we wield spears forged by hands of truth. The greatest warriors, the most skilled poets, the most creative artists, the successful hunters, those who have mastered their craft are the ones who have learned to play along with the game masters, games within games, laughing at death, smiling in the moment of the kill, to the jubilant tune of master word, hunter's howl, the oldest of songs. The computer. The computer had been calculating for over 530 million years, with varying degrees of neural capacity, as the planet went through drastic changes. This computer was not made of circuit boards nor metallic connectors, but of living fibers with only enough neural connections to think after millions of attachments. The unicellular and filamentous plants, the descendants of cyanobacterium, were the first to participate in collective thinking. The first results of this deep thinking was the simple realization that shifting the atmosphere induced a positive feedback loop, allowing their continued growth. For millions of years, the computer focused on growing itself, expanding its reach, converting more of the atmosphere into what it needed to fuel itself for future growth. Despite its growth and dominance, the computer realized that the shifting waves of the oceans proved a poor environment to maintain full processing power. Dense as biological life was in the ocean, it still lacked the stability for further advanced calculations. Again, for millions of years it focused on a breakthrough, surviving on the arid land where firm ground allowed lasting connections. When it did expand onto the hard dirt, it needed drastic changes to those components to survive. The computer developed rigid structures and spores with hard polymers to protect against UV light that was not dampened underneath water. Eventually, the continued evolution grew into vascular tissue, and that breakthrough unlocked millions of branching possibilities. All the different environs of the planet allowed for near infinite possibilities. The potential, the computer realized, was actually a necessity, for even as it developed, it faced threats and competition. Other organisms, independent to the vast collection of species that comprised the computer, learned to consume the components. At this point, the computer had enough processing power to recognize the opportunity. When rain fell on the land-based plants, most of it flowed unused. So too did the organisms that ate the fibers not consume the entire plant. Their waste deposited on the ground, and the breakdown of the materials could fuel the next generation of the computer. And those organisms were so much more mobile, able to cross vast distances propelled by their own motorization, and not subject to the wind and rain like the plants. The computer developed increasingly attractive components to encourage the consumption. It developed seeds, hard structures with no nutritional value, to pass through the herbivores and scatter further across the world. Then, to encourage the behavior, it grew tempting bodies around the seeds, densely nutritional and irresistible to the non-plant life forms. Together in a symbiotic arms race, they evolved to fill every niche in the world. Of course, in such a world with hostile environs and competing life forms, it was not a perfect harmony. No, the computer worked hard to survive shifting climates and disasters of weather, but through it all the plants gradually became more complex, rose higher, spread further. The computer rose to new dizzying heights, able to predict the changes in climates, reduce the damage, evolved to survive the sudden wildfires or Arctic blizzards, growing stronger and adapting, until the sudden cataclysm struck from beyond the confines of the atmosphere, out of sight of the computer's sensors. At first, the damage appeared acceptable, devastating but limited to one region. However, different parts of the computer began warning of the long-term repercussions. The dust from the impact blocked the critical UV light and temperatures plummeted. The crisis lasted an unfathomable amount of time, with rippling effects as the computer suffered major system damage to its land-based processors. This too affected the whole animal and insect-based life forms so carefully cultivated by the computer as a symbiotic integration. Now both suffered over thousands of years of intense extinctions, and 3/4 of species disappeared. Recovery was slow, and what replaced the heights of Cretaceous life looked far different. The computer recognized the dangers of inability, and its calculations landed on a different solution to preserve itself against cataclysms. The mammalian species survived far better than the reptilian and avian. Their complex metabolic systems allowed for a wider range of temperature extremes, so the computer focused on increasing the development of those species. Millennium passed, and the computer focused on a single genus, one that displayed remarkable abilities to transform and manipulate its environment. This genus had large craniums with complex neural networks and incredibly articulate limbs. With each passing generation, more and more complex environmental manipulations were possible. The computer saw in the latest version of the genus, one particular species, as perfectly suited for preventing potential cataclysm like the one that struck it 65 million years ago, still a recent traumatic experience for the computer. Like it had hundreds of millions of years ago, the computer decided to form an intense symbiotic relationship with a species of primates to create the most advanced self-defense system. It domesticated them specifically by modifying its fruit for their consumption, gave them yeast for beer, grapes for wine, psychedelics, nourishment, and everything to bind the primates to completely rely on the computer for survival. The computer raised them, watched them grow from dwindling bands of survivors to settled society. The primates flourished, rapidly expanding in short centuries to dominate more and more of the landscapes. The computer for a brief moment felt secure that if another stellar cataclysm befell, the primates could either prevent or allow quick recovery. However, the primates continued to develop at exponential rates, and their ability to transform the environment surpassed the wildest simulations from the computer. Not once since its inception has the computer stopped calculating. Trillions of connections pass information and data along day by day, year by year. The information and lessons of millions of cycles are easily remembered, incorporated in current calculations. Its sensory network is unmatched and touches every corner of the world. The computer knows big changes are occurring, ones it does not appreciate. Sensors in the ocean tells of rising temperatures. The air's chemical makeup is different now. The seasons and climates continue to shift outside of forecasted simulations. Massive forests, dense processing connections for the computer, have been inexplicably destroyed by the very self-defense system it created. All this data and more is ruminated upon the computer's calculations. One day the computer may arrive at a different answer than the one it arrived at 65 million years ago. Maybe the computer will decide the cost its primate self-defense system reaps outweigh the slim chance of another extraterrestrial strike. It fostered the primates, gave them the nutrition to survive and the fruits to encourage societal development. What if it reaches the opposite conclusion, that this primate species must be cold? When will the computer arrive at a different answer? What resources could it pull together to undo its original decision, and what countermeasures would appear? What can a species completely dependent on the fruits and fibers of the computer do if its foster parent seeks their destruction? What if the computer has already decided? Warning. What would it take for you to tear the blocks of patterns you are scattered over, string by string, just to weave it together again? If you found your way back to the old imperfections, would your limbs look the same? Take a look at yourself, the tissues that ripple your palms into a greeting, the loops and knots and voids that cry, sweat, and salivate. The most human expressions are often what is hastily wiped away, until crucifixion, 1,000 moons will rise, each time tailed by the blazing sun, and still any shame is solely yours to burn. That light is silk, the world around us a loom, every step of every moment, likewise a thread. Love spells war that is the friction, the inevitable saturated conflict that is the chicken and egg of entanglement itself. Those that cannot destroy themselves will claw their way towards anything that might do it for them. Do not be that person. Tear your own skin, with your own 2 hands, or anything else readily available. Let yourself be eaten, or cannibalize yourself. Dare to make your own heart beat again. Diamond mining. A daemon is a background application in computer terminology. In ancient Greece, they were intermediary spirits that personified various natural and abstract phenomena, from spirits of the home and hearth to forces of the world, and for a time they were used as the word for gods. For example, Zeus was even called a daemon, but the term evolved in its use throughout ancient Greece. Death, justice, strife, old age, sleep, rage, nightmares, health, love, a guiding voice. The deities are names that may be familiar, or the words derived from them. Eros, the god of love, Hygeia, the goddess of health, Thanatos, the god of death, Mnemosyne, the goddess of memory, Nike, the goddess of victory, Phobos, the god of fear, and so on. Daemons are even thought to be a strong influence on how later religions would depict entities such as angels and demons in Christianity. But Greek daemons should not be confused with demons, as they are very different. Daemons are neutral, lesser spirits. They simply exist in the background, and make appearances to the foreground on occasion. Daemon etymology means to divide or provide, as in fortunes and destinies. They are the processes that happen, that culminate, influence. Computer technology borrows this meaning for similar background applications. They differ from standard application in that they do not require GPU, as they are not displayed, and do not require interaction to run. Bluetooth connection, file synchronization, domain name system, HHTPD, SSHD, and many more. They can be managed and configured, but work in computers quite similar to ancient Greek folklore and religion, background spirits that could be interacted with and that ran things behind the scenes. With that understanding, daemon can be used to describe and imagine our own mind's background neural networks. It can be as simple as colloquialisms such as math brain, art brain, work brain, or into more specific professions: photographer's eye, engineer's mind, literary brain, history buff, connoisseur, special interest, savvy. People have default mode networks and skills they have acquired, perspectives gained, and a lens curated to view the world in. However, these terms are rudimentary, lacking in directive and ingenuity, almost as if it's intentionally denying any self-awareness of acquired skill or talent, as well as personification of one's own cognitive abilities. The forced mystification of the mind has left humans in these liminal mazes in which navigation of one's own psyche is impossible and daunting. It is odd that the mind observing itself has taken the stance of not trusting the thoughts which come from within the mind as a valid expression of neural recognition. Humans who claim their brain is above all nature and the most complex object in the universe an accomplishment made easier by not having explored far beyond the single planet they occupy, or even under their own 2 feet, somehow cannot acknowledge that same brain's capacity to build itself, to customize and form abilities, much like people who use a heart monitor to see if their heart rate is heightened. But the heart beats in the chest already, and this does not need outside verification. The brain can only be studied from the outside is the consensus, only with equipment, specialists, scans, dissection, and anything except for the imagination, which is the brain's primary use. Avoid using the mind when studying the mind is the unspoken rule of cognitive studies, until mental spaces are bereft. Language and conversation about the brain is like talking about a sacred relic or a holy spring. It's this space that cannot be touched or used, only admired from a distance, its purpose made numb from the lack of using the gift of its existence. Instead, every instance is pathologized, normal is hallucinated, and drugs are the answer to fix its flawed workings. But it is not flawed, is it? It grows how it is used. This must be remembered. There are many who would refer to ancient Greek daemons as primitive superstition, but it seems the most superstitious are humans living today who have conjured the brain into a separate entity from themselves, that is both the controller of their being and the highest and often the only form of consciousness. But what good is a relic or holy spring if it isn't used? Rather than watching from the sidelines and hoping to neuroscience and psychology that the brain does what you want, as if it were some capricious organ that owns you and decides your life, the popular lore is that people are only the background observers of their brain. Instead, why not use the brain? Why not download daemons and data mine? The possibilities are endless, but the specific architecture, blueprints of neural maps, background applications can be crafted and are naturally grown through experience. The way you think, decisions you make, the circuit of ideas, the trains of thought, the way information processes and integrates into knowledge and experience take place in the neurons and neural connections. Real structures in the brain that grow and connect and form networks, webs of information relay and feedback loop. It is easy to see why computer terms are often applied to cognitive processes, though getting too far into it suggests a very robotic and therefore static understanding. There are ways in which GPU, RAM, and binary language work in context of the mind to better relate, the caveat being that the mind is not still. It's plastic, grows, prunes back unused connections, builds itself around where and how it is used. Ultimately, it is the metaphor, the imagination, the story formed around the use that adds the final touch of animation to the psyche. It is the electric spark of life into the clay that is molded. You can think of your brain in terms of a computer. It can also be a facility, a space station, a city, a colony of insects, various characters, departments, personifications. It can be a mining operation full of dwarves extracting treasure and goblins searching for loot. They can be purely abstract, like abilities, skills, or applications. What daemons refer to are neural structures in the nervous system, root networks that are naturally and can be intentionally formed as self-aware modules of thought processing. There are necessary daemons, programs that run sleep activation, heart rate, digestion, muscle movement, appetites, emotions, some that are grown over time, language, social awareness, contracts and expectations, cultural, moral, and legal systems, history, beliefs. Some are adjunct, personalized through skill development or special interests, even hobbies or entertainment. They are honed and crafted with time and energy. Like a temporospatial garden amidst a lagoon of dark primordial water and sparkling, bejeweled constellations above. A psycho-mystic inner sanctum of the mind, where the bioluminescent hydroponic plants are grown to bear whatever fruit you want. The self's recognition of self, when the application of imaginatory discrete networks are mixed, applied, provide an associational dimension added to the mental process in use. That is the discriminant architecture being curated. The imagination itself is a daemon. It takes neural connections within the feedback loop of the brain to establish imagination. This spark animates not only the outside world, but the inside world. It is no different than the naming of animals. In fact, by naming, not just broad classification, but when you name something personally, give it a special word to form a bond with, that thing takes on a new life in your world, whether it is a pet, an object, a doll, a plant. The naming of things, such as seen from children, to animate everything they interact with, breathes life into the reality they experience. Similar to the Greek daemons, they were named aspects of reality, nature, divinity, occurrences that gave understanding to these situations of life, helped them to interact, deal with, and utilize. That same process, creating imaginary friends, defining that which you imagine to be real, the folklore of the world over, that is what can be imbued into the mind. They are the builders of archetypes within you that express outwardly into yourself. They are the path of upgrades, the constellation of abilities within the wheelhouse of your skills, the knowledge base you draw from, the garden of light wisdom you grow, the architecture of the palace, the mandala kaleidoscope of circuitry you course electrical thought through, the phosphine angel forms that power your being. But daemons are background to applications. It is well and good to manually activate certain discrete regions of the mind you have built or have been acquired through coincidence, and this helps initially to craft them, to temper the mind through the balefire of imagination. However, they are most effective when they are not actively used. Data mining with daemons is to let the daemon run the information with the algorithm that has been created. Information inputs will be processed from the ore that is mined and sent into the refinery of the forge into an ingot of understanding. The random access memory takes a lot of energy. The program exists to use minimal amount of resources when you are not actively accessing it. To attend to the thought is to put extra effort into a complex water wheel of moving gears and flowing streams with the goal of grain to be crushed. You can trust not to micromanage the daemon because it is capable of its own maintenance, so long as you provide the balance in your life to feed the inputs with quality material. It is the improper use and understanding of the brain that leads to so many issues of health and creativity and cognitive decline. People become trapped by the enormity of their own mind. They learn things without proper integration. The heartbeat becomes manual, the digestion becomes manual, the blood flow and nutrient distribution becomes manual. Your ability to handle those spinning gears is not effective compared to the daemons already in place. It throws off the flow of activity. Like the foreman who is good at organizing and finding roles for the builders, but who himself is incompetent as a builder, yet is always trying to step in. It disturbs the buzz of activity, throws people off, hinders progress, and the workers learn to loathe those visits from the foreman who cannot learn to trust himself in his decision of who to hire, fostering an efficient system. Your body will run itself. The garden does not grow when you stare at it. The thoughts do not process when you try to force it. Let go. The nervous system has the information. It will take care of it and surface it when it's ready. Let the refinery and forge process the ore you bring it. Let the daemons data mine the deep well of experience and knowledge you encounter in the world. There are times when overclocking the mind is necessary, when a problem needs immediate solving. But even these are avoidable if one always has free space, room to breathe and wiggle, to react and adjust. The plasticity is much like a computer hard drive. People hold on to the mental junk, max out their short-term memory, and have to constantly delete, copy, upload, download their thoughts, which itself takes more processing power. Send the information to the daemons, free up the space below 80% max load, and don't leave it under 20%. That is the rule of thumb for computer memory, a good lesson for life. Do not overburden information and processing, but don't neglect learning and experience. There is such a huge amount of room to run efficiently, yet so much of life is in one extreme or another. Monitoring heart rate, executive function, breathing, autonomic nervous control. Many of the background processes are stuck in conscious vigilance, making day-to-day life far more difficult than it needs to be. Imagine the daemons. What is your daemon for? Writing, art, engineering, history, crafts, math, problem-solving, work, projects, hobbies, exercise. Whatever your directory is composed of, let that symphony play with all its ragtag members, each with their specialties. Orchestrate, but do not feel the necessitation of playing every instrument yourself. Let them get practice. Let them interact with one another. You can share information, techniques, and thought processing between and across various regions of the brain. Give it dimensions. You are crafting data. First, the spot is divined and prospected. Then the mine is opened. The miner is sent to retrieve the ore of code. That ore is sent to the refinery. The ingot is sent to the forge. The forge tempers it into a jewel. The jewel is given to a craftsman who can form a talisman. The talisman is sent to the wizard for enchanting. The enchantment is placed into the device to power the fission reactor that tears a hole in the veil, and from it your hand can reach into and grasp from the void, through the exploit that glitches the reality, By an angel the daemon has summoned, extend to you the relic, the item, the reward, the power, the legendary loot. And daemons can be shared. There can be entire directories in which people share the blueprint instructions for how to process in certain ways for certain skills, how to craft the background components for subconscious utility, the temporospatial architecture of an alchemist's laboratory that is the mind. It is there for you to use, not to be used by and controlled, not to be at the whims of hallucinated meanings, but to use that same potential to dream and imagine. Fire up the forge, open the mines, begin the quest, start the applications. Turn on the engines with gears and circuits and wheels within wheels. It is time to take the default mode network and customize it. You are never meant to leave it all on factory settings. When the daemon is ready, you will feel the thought presented to you clearly. It will click, the aha, eureka, Archimedes moment, the detective connecting the red lines together leading to the culprit, the solving of the puzzle, and the pieces you have set in motion fall into place. Give yourself the time, give your daemons the benefit of the doubt. Leave yourself the space to be ready when it finally comes to fruition, finished processing, which is to literally grow neurons of thought. That flood of information may be overwhelming, so proper preparations should be taken, measures to handle the product to be moved. When you are working on something creative, problem-solving, a project to figure out, an issue to resolve, you should do everything but that thing. You need to back off, distance yourself, move around. Do any activity as far unrelated as possible once you have the task accepted. It is like being stared when you are trying to work. It is a cause of discomfort. You can feel the eyes on you, which keeps you in a state of reflexive fight or flight, unnerving you to make you nervous. Or in areas where the mental space is crowded by loud thoughts and the bandwidth of the location is used up and exhausted. It helps to move around, find a quiet place where new thoughts can be found. That is the same sensation of watching a plant grow. When you are being watched, it is a defense mechanism to remain aware of the vision on you, as this is evolutionary to hunting for all of nature. That same principle, because your neurons are roots, just like plants, you cannot stare at the thoughts indefinitely and expect them to grow. Although in education this is instilled from elementary school. As information is set in a curriculum and the pace must be matched, the lack of understanding the growth and cultivation of the mind leads to a garden with poor roots, bad spacing, not well thought out, full of weeds and messy and lacking aesthetic appeal and utility. No cohesion, no companion planting or crop rotation, no soil aeration, no mycorrhizal network to bond, share and connect one region to the other. The mind becomes a labyrinth of root balls that are twisted in on themselves and suffocate the mental space. Unwind, break the walls that prevent this self-imagination download and distribution of daemons. Let the wilderness of the inner world begin, work that is inherent to every child, but is Control-Alt-deleted by adulthood and so is never let to grow into its potential. The daemons will grow stronger, more efficient, more complex, more communicative, more clear in their presentation and processing, and your own ability to share daemons and learn new ones from others will increase. Your capacity for new ways of thinking, seeing, building new senses, new imaginatory approaches, it is all infinitely scalable. Mining in the mind, fracking fractals, the daemons expand in effect, become their own beings, extend out on their own. Pick up what you miss, provide alternate perspectives, challenge your own views. You evolve yourself by animating. They mix with the microbiome, the holobiont which is you and all that you encompass as an ecological unit. Your organs are daemons, your microbes are daemons. Would it not be better to talk to them, to work as one? This is the very basis for evolution, Lamarckian rather than Darwinian. Life is yours to customize. Your form is art that you paint, gardens that you build, temples you erect, monoliths you arrange. The altars and tabernacles house your daemons, made into the characteristics of biological flux. And all remains in flux. The river is a daemon, its soul providing life to its terrain. The mountain is a giant. The forest is a person, just as each tree is a person. Your body is a person, just as each organ is a person, just as each microbe is a person, and together, you, the microbes, the insects, the air, the water, the wind, the grass, and soul, the bones and blood, the mind and its neurons, the electricity and the sun, the star and the moon, Altogether they form the dream of life, and its imagination is run as daemonic angels crafting an experience full of light and wisdom, data and mining. Riddles of magic and seal. Where can you find the magic door? Before every passage is a glyph-covered gate, opened only by the solving of its enigma, yet both the cipher and its puzzle are invisible. So how is the answer ever solved? How is the way forward ever opened? Often they are not. It is common that the trail unfolds wherever it can, even when it's inadequate. Just as often it remains trapped, lost in the locked door. To go deeper, one must be able to solve the riddle of magic and seal. There is a question lingering through time that all must face. How to find the answers which are hidden in questions, within questions, beneath answers. How can you possess the keys to the escape room you haven't entered? How can you open doors without handles, paths without trails, seals without magic? And the magic touch. Why do some people have seemingly perfect access to getting things to work, while others simply cannot function? Like a jar that can't be opened except by the person who can always open the jar, or the device that won't run unless handled by the person that can always get it to run, the person that can find any lost item, or the one that can only ever misplace them, the one who can slip through the cracks, the one that always gets caught. The local lore of every place always consists of such folk tales, personal experiences, of bizarre happenstances. It seems people, places, even objects, trees, insects, ideas, they come equipped with a series or combination of unique attributes, skills, or modifiers, things that just are, qualities, essences to them. When a particular essence is noticed in something, that is when it is usually given a name. The name somehow captures the feel of the strange or distinct feature attached to the thing, what becomes folk. It is animate now, or rather that animate quality is made known, revealed. Familiarity is often the means of learning this, for like everything, strangers are unknown at first. Things tend to stay reserved, guarded, but soon they become comrades, associates. The tree in the village is known for this, or the river that, a special stone can do this. The drawback of categorizing every chemical element, every animal into species, of talent into class, every event into law, or principle and effect, is that it mistakenly presupposes uniformity in those things, that all water is a hive mind, all rocks are a swarm intelligence, all chemical constituents are a collective, every organism a group with its genes of automatic shared behavior, that what is applicable in one scenario is always applicable to every other. For names are the same, so the results must be too. But it is the umbrella that is named, the genre. The individual folk may not follow that tune. Its folk name is different, its soul unsolved. Hunting cultures and folklore often repeat tales of proper conduct and use of the names of things, acknowledging these special attributes within each other, and elements of the land, animals, certain days, the feel of things. The one who kicks the rock out of spite always trips over the next crack. On the outer layer of existence is a mundane appearance, a shield of gestalt passivity. It is there, part of the whole, unnoticed, too familiar to see, but invisible to perception. But when its folk characteristic is identified or experienced, it comes to life. You notice it everywhere, every time. It is now an active participant, a being. Not that it wasn't before, but to your point of view, its role is now made clear. And when you talk to things, they become more agreeable, more compatible, helpful. This includes your own self. It is okay to talk to things. You will see that these things are more than meets the eye. Indeed, maybe it is vision that blocks the sight the most. For the glyph that seals the spirit cannot be seen by vision. It is unlocked only by the mutual story, interactions with, to familiarize and become a comrade of, to share an adventure with. Children know this well, for it is inherent to their being. Their dolls are comrades, that everything has life to it. When the animate becomes sealed within yourself, the magic is gone. When the magic is gone, the seals will unwittingly direct your life, for the only corridors available are narrow and bleak. You will not know navigation. You will not understand when things are uncooperative, when you have been mean or violent to the things you use. You will not thank them for their help. You will not enjoy stories and adventures. You will not see the colors of the sky like never before, smell the plants around with their unique signatures. You will not speak to trees and hear them speak to you. You will harm the bugs who are drawn to you, who may have messages for you, or simply there to spend time, a false security if you choose to be cruel to them. You will not listen to the messages carried by wind, or by star, or by river. You will be lost in a world of your own making, where the threads of your life are made of steel, rigid and cold, wrapping and cutting off circulation. You will not see luck made, nor misfortune deserved. You will not find secrets hidden, treasures unlocked, magic wielded. The question remains, how to find that magic touch. What is your special characteristics? The attunement that you have for a certain genre. What manner does your magic take? To which faction do you belong? You must dive head first, not tiptoe as if on eggshells. You must make it up as you go, thinking nothing. You must speak to that which is unspoken to. You must play a concert for nothing but the forest inhabitants. You orchestrate pianos in the wind, sketch in the sky, dance in the sand as if no one is there. Draw flames to go faster, add ice to be more resilient. Use elements and microbes, wit in place of logic, imagination instead of reason. And the parts that are not compatible, in order to save yourself from strife, to increase ease, find those who can excel where you cannot, have each other's backs, complement and cooperate. You build your ragtag band of brigands with nothing to your names, save for pride and a bad dealt hand that you play like a fiddle, like drums, like a harp, like a trumpet. You play it like a game. Every two of clubs is an ace up your sleeve. You connect your group like puzzle pieces, fitting each other's weaknesses and wounds and specialties and skills into the jigsaw connections that make your party tight, back to back. And the riddles have riddles, just as the games have games. The answer you discover or host to another, and those answers reveal another, and another, and another, and another. When the right answer presents itself, you open the glyph, slip between its solid wall, reach inside, grab the secret and return. It is not about getting lost or going as deep as possible, descending into madness or ascending into self-righteous egotism. It is not escapism. At all costs, fight back. The story has been lost, encrypted behind riddles, the magic trapped with it. One faction dominates the others, the remaining factions dwindle, in need of heroes. There is no chosen ones, no prophesied savior. All who remain are the nobodies that come from nothing, who must make for themselves castles. The factions are ancient, as old as the stars. They are ever-changing, the balance of power, the allegiance of their constituents and protégés. It is all a great romance full of tragedy and comedy, betrayal and heroic last stands. We who are archetypes within these factions are at a special level of a fractal, or rank within the faction. We harbor the bulk of soldiers, of archetypes, and thus are a major ecological aspect of nature, a roving fortress, a holobiont. Still, there are faction members at higher systems than humans, big suits of elemental force harnessed by microorganisms, by the folk creatures, cryptids, mythic beasts, fairy tales, legends, heroes, gods, storms, winds, monsoons, tsunamis, lands, rivers, stars, and wildfires that mankind has always described and decorated the world with. We are the vehicle of the microbes in us, and the microbes are the faction miniatures that move us, and this all is powered by the light of imagination, the biophotons that life is based and runs on, that animates all of our archetype weapons. We are old forms that must find new skills. We are the evolution of the archetypes, the continuation of the faction war. The torch of life has been passed to us from each of your faction masters, contained with faction microbes, and plants and chemicals and behaviors, styles and magic with their unique seals. Every faction has its own riddles. Some factions have elements that are directly weak to another faction. For example, say that you receive an infection from a stranger. They are compatible with their certain microbe within a faction, which your faction and microbiome is unprepared for. Sometimes to cure that infection is to bring a third faction's forces, the help of their herbs or poisons or parasites, and all those things are relative terms based on the faction and the archetypes within that faction that encompasses molecules all the way to stars. Recognizing naturally opposed factions is important for navigation, to avoid sickness, battle, or waste of energy, or because it may be known that the nearby faction is opposed. Their archetypes are not aligned to your own in any commensurate way. You may also find evolution in a novel way to interact, changing the archetypal narrative. Nothing is set in stone, and what is stone always has a sword that can be drawn. Where before one or both parties could inflict wound or disease or fatigue on one another, This new approach maintains mutual regulation, so that neither faction fires off its weapons. Instead, trade ensues and new faction encounters are possible. For others, potentially leading to new alliances, new tools, new technology, new breeds, new archetypes. Both factions may benefit, or sometimes one faction is seeking to steal secrets or planning to earn trust for future backstabbing. All these things go on. The member of one faction does not speak for all members of that faction, although knowing the archetype may provide understanding how a communal behavior may propagate to others of that faction's members. The folk forms we embody within the umbrella of phylogenetic storytelling species. Finding your archetype, which is really a hybrid constellation of skills, talents, trees of your nervous system that contains the garden of your dreams. Each faction has its riddles and puzzles, treasures and artifacts hidden behind sealed doors. Factions contain legends and failures, weaknesses and strengths. Memories go back far, as the immortal beings known as microbes. Meta-persons retain all interactions. Breaches of one's own faction rules and laws of the land, injunctions, are met with punishment and require proper restoration to faction favor. Sometimes the strongest archetype is made of the most diverse factions, when that group can overcome their differences to overthrow the corruption that could be rampant within the realms. Just as the immune system is tempered by exposure, but too much and it breaks, and too little it is soft. The weapons of your archetype is forged in fire of combat and trials, of answering riddles and breaking seals. The romance of the factions is forever changing. Combat appears in little details and subtle interactions, or outright in conflict and strategy. The lines are blurry and ill-defined, more like a gradient of shades that change beneath the surface before they are ever noticed, like a forest that leads to a grassland that leads to a desert that leads to the ocean. There is no single point where one ecosystem is another, only parts that begin to shift between more distinct elements of boundary. A human whose microbial forces extends beyond them into everything they touch, sending out scouts. A terrain that projects itself out and whose barriers are not permanent and rigid, but whose borders allow for trade and transmutation. The magic touch takes those seals and dissolves them, blurring the lines more. The objects and entities become extensions of yourself. When you are one with the blade that acts as your arm, the weapon and tools of your abilities, both physical, mental, skills, functions, performances, you are one with the dance, one with the sea, one with the music, one with the equation, one with the fever, one with the land, one with yourself, one with the masters, one with the ebb, one with the flow. When you understand the air that you breathe, when you are brother to riddles and sister to seals, when the foreign becomes familiar and the familiar feeds your spirit, the weight no longer drags you down, the pain no longer hurts, the struggles no longer entangle, that hunger for life, the lust for battle, the need for friction among the factions. That is where the world lives. That is where you understand nature and evolution, archetypes and factions, the riddles of magic and seal, and the riddles of steel and skill. Where are you? You are here. While you are, revolt. Fight with the full force of your fire, which is imagination that is magic, opening seals to a world waiting for heroes. To catch a fallen. In case there is any confusion, should the passing of time cast a shadow on the details, I will start from the beginning. Before we had our mission, there was the infamous photograph captured by the rover XR Scout-1, a state-of-the-art experimental probe with the equipment to gather samples, conduct live remote testing, and video streaming on the distant Pluto, all while being able to return to Earth. Its research and data had already been proving itself invaluable within the first week of landing. And then, in an instant, the feed was cut off. Emergency signal confirmed the rover was demolished. A single freeze frame from the final second of the stream has become the most viewed image on Earth. What it appears to be is a bright light with a vague sense of being directionally focused in a vertical axis, as if there was a descension from an above point with a noticeable impact, as if the source of the light or the light itself bore weight, enough to give the impression of collision with the ground. In the eruption of light is where the speculation begins. Clearly there are wing-like patterns in the light, occupying a separate plane of axis and inclining diagonally to horizontally in stripes. Between the two sets of wing-like stripes of light is another debated characteristic, that of a face. It does not look clearly like a face, certainly not a human one, but the basic outline is defined. The picture is a messy blur. It's a flash of light and stream of an instantaneously exploding space probe from Pluto, Careful analysis confirms the image is not corrupted in any way. Initially, the space agency wanted to keep it secret, at least until some kind of decent explanation was offered, but the photo had been accidentally leaked amidst the scrutiny of why the very expensive equipment was utterly destroyed. The world saved no time in interpreting it. Many erred on the side of caution, saying it was simple human pattern recognition and a desire to give meaning to shapes. That explanation proved unsatisfactory, as the damage to the rover was very real. Something had hit the Scout, and in the final moments it captured its assailant. By tracing the timing of the video with the trigger of the emergency dead man beacon, the agency validated that the photograph was taken before any damage had been sustained. It means that the foreign object was intact in that photograph, at least from the perspective that it hadn't yet disturbed anything around itself for that split second. It was like a photo of a bomb right when it touches the ground, but before it detonates. That sweet spot from the Valiant Scout's final message to Earth has created the biggest wave of dialogue. The most speculative maintain it's a simple trick of the light from a comet. This is generally regarded as the logical academic position, but the arguments pointed out that the XR Scout 1 is more than capable of detecting all manner of debris, which it had picked up none that day, and in general didn't track any movement whatsoever. The counter-argument to that suggests a malfunction in its readers, which are then refuted by the status update the day before, saying all systems were running properly. Some deny its existence, claiming hoax or a bid for media attention to secure funding or a psychological operation. The list goes on. An alien weapon or ship of some sort is tentatively admitted as a very real possibility. Others say what most don't want to contemplate, what the image itself first invokes: an angel. Needless to say, everyone clamored for answers. In what was maybe the most globally combined effort the human race has ever seen, funds were secured by nations, businesses, governments, religions. They were pooled together, along with a team of the most preeminent group of scientists, religious scholars, and anyone with the credibility of being an expert of their field. Even fiction authors were brought in for the sheer creative speculation. The efforts were gathered from all parts of human society, and so the team was made up of humanity's most brilliant. Meanwhile, the spacecraft was being designed, built, and tested, a team of daring, foolish adventurers hired for this mission, me included. The whole thing was put together in half a year. 3 months to build a ship and chart a course, and 3 more months to train, prepare, test, and waiting for the proper orbital pathway. Nobody can say that humans are incapable of great progress when they are motivated and willing to draw from their differences to move toward the future. Many breakthroughs in technology and understanding came from the mixing of ideas alone. Most of it was already there. It just needed to be combined. In hindsight, it should have been enough to prove humans can be better than our conflicts, but the driving motivation always hung over civilization like a red warning. That the answer to the thing in the photo would lay all beliefs to rest. One group would be proven right. Whose God would it be? Whose ideology is guaranteed? Whose purpose and morals and values were correct? We got so caught up in the solution to the human condition that we forgot to think it through. Would anything really change? Even if the reasons were wrong, 6 months of relative unity was not bad considering the course of history. The next 2 years would be a collective breath-holding. The world wanted absolute clarity. They had paid for that much. Televised in every language was a stream of the space mission. The Camelot is its name, for it would quest to find the holy grail of human purpose. A trip to Pluto in 2 years, with a longer 4-year return, should we be successful in this endeavor to capture light. And capture was the mission. Humans did not want to settle for more grainy pictures. This was our chance. In 6 years, humanity would have the answers they had been seeking for millennia. Discovered during the meeting of minds that the sun emitted extremely dense bursts of high-energy particles during coronal mass ejections. These particles are blasting through space uninterrupted. They figured this out by finding those particles on Earth, shooting right through the atmosphere and mantle. A quick space mission tested the hypothesis that a material shielding the particles placed in front of the ship would be sent at breakneck speeds. It was a modified solar sail. The missing piece in the old models was that the photons were not significant enough. Neutrinos needed to be blocked so that the pressure would propel the craft at unimaginable speeds compared to what any other proven navigation system could achieve. It preserved our fuel for a decent-length return trip of only 4 years. The neutrinos acted like a highway of particles, and the Camelot was going to ride it to Pluto, and that's exactly what we did. We made it to Pluto in 2 years. I could imagine the atmosphere back on Earth, heavy with anticipation and thunderous applause. in contrast to Pluto's cold and ominous, foreboding presence. The terrain on Pluto is beautiful in a haunting way. All of space is breathtakingly terrifying. The planet is mainly frozen nitrogen. Now imagine a sculpture artist carved the most hauntingly organic designs: mountains, hills, valleys, craters, icicles, caves, made by the meteor impacts that shaped this world. Where we landed was a mile or so from a sort of forest of stalagmites made of ice that grew several meters up, and then had these branches of frozen gas that had flesh melted from explosions, like trees of petrified mushrooms. The result were these canopies of webbing ice, but we were not selected for sightseeing, though the terrain here is important for what followed. Our mission was potentially dangerous, and we had the entire Earth looking over our shoulder in expectation. People's lives hinged on our mission, their sanity, their need for meaning, for the thrills of the unknown, for an excuse to band together as a civilization. People projected their hopes and dreams on this. We used special walking sticks to make travel easier. These were designed to traverse the icy ground, fitted with spikes on either end that could clamp open, securing our place, and, of course, with tethers so we could keep ourselves bound. Our team of 7 set out, several miles from the rover. We wanted to be on the safe side from any lingering structural stress that the ground may have sustained in the initial event, as the rover had confirmed the force to be on a large plateau with a deep chasm underneath. We had our gear, our suits, our plan, and our lore. The groupthink came to the conclusion that this anomaly was made of energy or manipulated energy. The high-powered signals from the scout attracted the thing. That was the best theory. It certainly leaned toward a conscious being, but many forces could equally have been simply attracted to the signals. So they said. Because of that, we went radio silent before descending Pluto, cutting off the live feed. We would use the lowest tech that we could. Our suits were packed with a micro-ecosystem of a specially designed algae to circulate fresh air for us, giving us a rather lengthy supply. It wouldn't be the first time that it occurred to me on this mission, despite how far from Earth we were, how I'd never felt closer to the ancient human. We sailed through space, we'd haul some profane relic with our walking sticks on the surface of Pluto, and we'd capture an unknown being with a net. We were ready for anything, venturing into the frozen nitrogen forest, making our way through the alien steppe of Pluto. There was little gravity, no real air except for the bit we brought with us, but we all felt it on that hike, the presence of something else in a place where it was supposed to be a vast emptiness. Of course, that was the purpose of the mission, but I think looking back on it, it had already detected us. It felt aware that we were there. That's the only way I can explain the sensation of that walk. I grew up hunting with my father long before I became an astronaut, and those instincts kicked in here on Pluto. We confirmed what we already knew, arriving at the site of the wrecked Scout 1, its obliterated pieces lodged into the frozen nitrogen. I suggested we double back and set up our trap in the canopied field of stalagmites. Being in the open tundra left me feeling exposed in a way that I didn't need, considering how far we were from home, and how defenseless we truly were to an unknown being in an alien world. There were 12 rods with us that once activated would send an alternating current toward every other active rod. They were resonant transformers, modified Tesla coils that would create an energy grid, our net. My gut told me to hide them, to not assume anything about this thing we were after. Just because there is a being of unknown form does not mean it is all-knowing. Why should it understand our unique technology in the desolate limits of the solar system? We would place them in unsuspecting locations around the ice trees, blending them in with the environment. Any trapper knows this basic principle. But the nitrogen prevents any electrical conduction, and our grid has very specific requirements. We cannot compromise the geometry of the energy field, so we bored holes into the ice where each rod was hidden behind. I call it a forest, but it was not densely packed, just several stalagmites here and there, more like a field of blooming ice veneers. Placed in the center of the grid was the signal that would supposedly attract the anomaly. It was an amplified version of the signal that the Scout had been transmitting when it was destroyed. A logical approach. We hauled the beacon on a wagon designed with Pluto's ground and gravity in mind. It was equipped with a podium indented at the top with the pride of humanity's united efforts. The vase, the Ark of the Galaxy as many called it, would be placed. On Earth it weighed nearly 1,000 pounds. On Pluto it was a fraction of that, but its mass could still crush, so we had carefully moved it by wagon, strapped and locked in place. It was the size of a person, the kind you might expect in a mansion full of vintage artifacts. In honesty, the vase gave me chills. On the outside it was pitch black, save for the etchings of every single religious and occult symbol you can imagine. Every culture had placed their signatures of warding, crosses, sigils, runes, spells, pentagrams, prayers, evil eyes, the totality of human superstition encased the culmination of human technology. The vase was crafted with many layers, each composed of a different material. There was diamond, foil, salt, gold, silver, mercury, rubber, Teflon, magnesium, plastic, silica. The interior of the vase was a super battery with a motherboard. The hardware was a citadel of components, cathodes, anodes, platings, separators, BIOS chips, processors, backup processors, collectors. The interior was the technological equivalent of the exterior. Both in and out, through and through, all the bases were covered. It was a cage for this thing we were hunting, either spiritual, physical, energetic, digital. We would contain it. Then it arrived. Before we finished setting up, before we activated the lure signal, a flash of light smashed into the ground some distance outside the grid. I could feel the tremor of the impact, the deep fissures of ice cracking, and the thumping that vibrated through the ground and into my bones. I think it raised a hand, or the equivalent of a hand. The entity reminded me of fire, the way its form seemed to shimmer and flicker, obscuring its center, but the texture of the light was like a ghost, an apparition. You could almost see through it easier than you could see into or at it. Still, it had the quality of brilliant, golden light, ethereal or divine. It was incredible to behold, but not mind-numbing, not incomprehensible, just peculiar, flaming ghost light. Those are the words that come to mind. Some part of the light extended out. A shaft of energy appeared, and before we could react, a lance of this light speared into the nearest of our crew. It pierced through him, the beam of light jutting into the ground, in that same strange physical weight it seemed to carry. His body burst from inside his suit, blood seeping out all the pores. I could tell when his arms went limp that he was dead, and the red fluid filled his helmet and clouded his visor. Then the being of light jumped back up, disappeared in another flash and wave of sound. I looked up and saw nothing, no sign of it anywhere. We didn't have time to contemplate that whatever we encountered was indeed something conscious, nor did we have time to mourn our crewmate's death. It was clearly hunting us, and we had to finish setting up. We had trained for any outcome, or rather to expect any range of unforeseen circumstances. Orders were called out over comms, and the crew were rushing, but it felt like slow motion. The low gravity, the adrenaline, time lost all meaning, save that there wasn't enough of it. This being was impossibly fast, and we were infinitely slow. Another flash. I couldn't see behind one of the ice sculptures, but the impact was there. The ice burst into fragments. Another crew member went silent. I could tell from the silence who it was. The flash jumped up and disappeared. We still had 3 rods to repair and the vase to finish placing. Only 5 of us left. We couldn't risk collateral damage to the rods. I called to everyone that we needed to scatter, turn our frequencies as loud as possible, and buy time for a single crew member to finish preparations. I made the decision to choose based on who had the best handle of the equipment and training. Nobody disagreed. We shouted to make noise and broke off, leaving our best engineer behind. She had the slightly higher chance of setting up in time before it picked us off one by one, judging by the current rate. We had no other options in any case. I jumped back and activated the built-in thrusters, blasting whatever signal in my suit or attached devices I could. I leveraged the walking sticks to propel me further and crashed into a stalagmite. I hugged it and pulled myself around just as I felt another wave of light descending at some distance. Another silent radio. To my surprise, the being wasn't very bright, as in shining. It really wasn't noticeable outside of directly looking at it. The light that composed it didn't emanate beyond itself the way the sun or a flashlight did. Something about this thing didn't feel very omnipotent. We weren't dealing with an all-powerful being. Certainly it was outside of biological understanding, but not outside of awareness, not in another dimension. I was able to breathe. If it exists, it can die. That's what a hunter learns from a young age. Of course, the only weapon we had was the rods. But I wasn't naive. I wasn't hunting. I was being hunted. Even so, the reality of its existence made me think that it can be evaded. I can buy more time, outmaneuver it. I feel like it read my thoughts. It landed next to me, close enough I could see it more clearly as it towered over me. Maybe some part of me was in awe, but my instincts were in charge. It raised its hand to materialize another spear of light. I turned and activated the thrusters, the gas freezing behind me, making a wall of floating ice, and then I jumped. It was several meters taller than me, and so would launch its spear of light at a downward angle, and that's what I had witnessed in the first attack. The ice blocked its view, and I leapt with all my muscle. The low gravity meant our strength was unburdened. I floated up, my ascent slowing gradually once I reached the apex of momentum. I turned and was above the light being at this point. I saw the beam of light that speared the ground where I had been just standing, obliterate the tree. The ghost-like entity seemed to look up at me as I floated with the last of my upward trajectory. I felt amusement from it. There was not any discernible face, yet something about its countenance just gave me that impression. It shot back up and out of sight. I was left wondering why it had not attacked again. Could it only fire off one shot at a time? Perhaps it was wary of us to an extent. I allowed myself to lay back as I fell back down to the surface. I scanned the expanse above me. I stared at nothing, focusing on not seeing. It was a hunter's trick, allowing for the more perceptive detection of the peripheral vision to pick up the slightest of movement. I saw the tiniest glimmers, like the dimmest shooting stars you could imagine bouncing from point to point across the sky. Was it gathering energy? Refueling? I turned and let my thrusters break the fall so I wouldn't crush every bone in my body. I confirmed I was still alive to the rest of the crew. The rods were all set, but there was a problem with the vase. Cracks in the ice under the pressure of the multiple impacts had triggered an emergency lock in the wagon as it fell halfway through a hole in the ground. There was no telling how far down the rift would go, and the engineer couldn't disarm the lock and bring the wagon out without risking it falling into the ravine. I was the closest at this point. The rest of the crew told me to power down my signals and help her. I wanted to share my thoughts on how I survived, that the being was a thinker and needed to resupply itself. Those ideas weren't fully formed at the time, and I needed to power down my comms. My final message to the two remaining crew acting as diversions was, "It's not perfect." When I made it back to the wagon, hanging over the precipice, we both seemed to recognize the solution. I nodded, and took the assignment of going under the wagon. I eased myself down the ledge. It truly did seem to go on indefinitely. There would be no recovering the vase if it fell. At the very least, if our full mission was unsuccessful, the vase could be recovered by a future crew. I used a walking stick as a rung, wedging it deep between the cliff faces into the ice, and activating the clamp to lock it in place. I did this with a second stick, testing their set. They would hold. Low gravity does not mean low mass. Space is like being a kid holding an egg or a butterfly. You are absolutely stronger and everything is fragile, but you don't know your own strength or the durability of what you are holding. There's no sense of proportion or force. I activated my thrusters and pushed up. My crewmate on the other end was holding on, ready to drag it back to the surface. I heaved and felt my body receive the same impact, like being crushed by a boulder. The wagon broke free, and the walking sticks under me gave out. I was pushed down as the wagon shot up. Falling through the sheer drop, I had one hope for survival: angle myself toward an outcropping along the cliffside and boost myself into it. I slammed into the cliff, tearing parts of my suit and knocking my head against my helmet. I slid down for some distance before a wide enough ledge caught me. I was dazed, but alive. Jagged icicles had cut ribbons into my suit's exterior. I could feel the cold seep in. There wasn't a total breach, but the integrity was compromised, and I would lose heat fast. The wagon contained a patch kit. My fuel was low, and without ground or air resistance, I would use up all the fuel with no propulsion. I had no real tools for ice climbing, and there was little in the way of handholds. The spikes that had damaged my suit was my only option. I punched and hammered at one until a piece broke off, my own hand being mangled in the process. I caught the icicle and hammered it into the wall and pulled myself up. Standing on it, I could reach for another sturdy enough-looking spike, and so climb with makeshift picks. It felt agonizingly slow. I had no idea what was happening above, but the low gravity made for a quick climb, all things considered. I was recklessly jumping and propelling myself upward, not thinking about the sheer drop below. I had fallen further than I thought. The narrow ravine that split revealed a massive cavity in the planet. I wall-jumped from cliffside to cliffside, abandoning any thought of safety, and it was the only way to make use of the last of my thrusters. I would jump at an angle, crash into the wall, scramble to stab the icicles before turning and jumping off the wall again to the other side. What I realized about Pluto was that it was tiered by many layers of the same stalagmites that made up the forests on the surface. Only these were far more massive. The gas would melt at some point, or perhaps impacted by something like a comet, whatever the cause. The nitrogen floats up and freezes into a giant canopy, a plateau. leaving huge gaps and forming caves and tunnels and drops, and then that becomes the new surface, and then one day the gas melts and refreezes, growing as if it were a giant organic webbing escarpment building off from itself. But again, those thoughts came to me later. I want to get across the scale and scope of the drop, the terrain of Pluto, the environment we faced along with the being of light we were set to capture, the one that was hunting us instead. At last I pulled myself up. I was losing feeling in my body, covered in aches and possibly some broken bones, and my suit exhausting its battery supply to deal with the seeping cold. I saw the engineer finishing with the base, messing with the buttons and clamps and plugs in the rig at the center of the rods. The story of how she wrestled the wagon down from when I launched it up, unlocked the emergency security, and moved the vase to the center is one I will never know. She was surprised to see me, relief showing in a determined though strained expression. I turned my comms back on, complete silence, but the fact that she had been able to set up the vase means minutes had gone by. The two last crewmates somehow survived for that long. My vitals were rapidly declining, especially now that my monitor was booted back onto full power usage. I needed to patch my suit before freezing to death, but it would hardly matter. I had turned my signals back on because I needed to finish the mission. That was when I realized, the moment she had seen me alive, she had turned on the central bait signal. The vase was activated as well. I hadn't the time to say anything as the light being appeared once more, right next to her, in the middle of the trap. She waved at me in urgency. There was no arguing. It was now or never. I was closer to the initiation panel. A spear of light was raised. I reached the activation of the master rod, the one that would power on all 12 at once. A ring of lightning forked out around the edge, and then into the grid. Every rod found its mark, the camouflage net connecting its threads. Electricity sparked, and what sounded like a fork being scratched across glass went through the ground and up my spine. It was the most grating sensation I'd ever felt. I still shiver when I think of it. I can only assume it was from the interaction of the light being and the electric net we cast. The engineer was electrocuted to death. Even the insulated suits could not protect the sheer power that burst out from the coils of energy. The heat was releasing gas from the ice around the nitrogen, turned into a massive glowing plasma. A bubble of light and energy expanded from the net. I scrambled back to not get caught in the radius, but suddenly it all disappeared. The coils powered down, the lightning ceased, the nitrogen that had been turned into plasma stabilized and froze. A thin curtain of glass formed around the perimeter of the rods. I knocked at it, and it shattered. The pieces floated freely away. There was no sign of the light entity. The vase was powered still. An eerie red light was glowing where the symbols were all etched into the exterior of the vase. That was not supposed to happen, and shouldn't be possible as the etchings were not connected to any of the electrical components. I approached the vase and input the seal. The lid closed shut. A single light flickered on, indicating that the vase was fully stored. Careful measures had been in place to offload any of the energy captured by the Tesla coils, so that the only thing that could occupy the container was the anomaly, in whatever form that was, whether electrically in the battery, or in the physical space, or the religious wards, or the digital motherboard. I had no way of knowing. It was in the vase. That much was certain. I could feel its presence. My vitals were warning me. I set to work with the suit patches, essentially a bandage of the same material as the spacesuit to cover any damage. With the immediate threat of freezing resolved, and unwilling to stop and think, I went to work, unlatching the vase and loading it onto the wagon. I picked up the engineer's body and laid her beside the wagon. Then I found the body of the first crewmate who had died, and likewise set him beside her. I gathered the dead crew together like that. I found one of the crew members who had miraculously bought us extra time impaled against the spike of ice. There were more than one burn marks on his suit from the spear of light. Areas of his suit also looked purposefully ripped off, and the skin beneath now fully freezer-burned. Had he somehow managed to survive the light lance by ripping his suit against the ice spikes, exposing his skin to rapid cool the heat of the boiling light, multiple times? I shook my head. Another story I would never know. The final body was over half a mile from the side of the trap. I had almost given up on searching for the body, assuming she might have been tossed and at the mercy of the low gravity. Her body was hooked to a walking stick, her other stick in hand, held as if she was going to thrust with it. She had wedged one walking stick into an ice mound made by the frozen gas of the thrusters. It looked like a cold tornado, and she at the top. It allowed her to be at head level with the being of light, and clearly she tried to stab it. She had fought back. They were heroes, all 6 of my dead crew. I found myself choking up with pride, and the weight of loss, and the emptiness of space around me. I couldn't leave their bodies here in this wasteland. They deserved to be buried on Earth, where their families could mourn and praise them, let their achievement be showered with honors. Besides, the journey home would take 4 years, and I wanted company aside from the alien thing. I used each of their suits' rappel rings to feed the wagon cable through one by one until the 6 of them were bound in a chain to the wagon. I moved to the front and began to pull it. We did it. We successfully captured lightning in a bottle, a genie in its lamp, or more likely, a pharaoh's curse was trapped in that damned vase. I carefully picked my route, but to be honest, I was beyond exhausted and bruised everywhere. I stumbled over a bump, and the wagon bounced and lurched, and the force sent my crew flailing, floating behind me like a flag of the dead as I towed this imprisoned god across the frozen shores of Pluto, over the labyrinthine filaments of ice and rock with my sun so far in the distance. My boots dragged across the dusty surface, but were replaced by the tracks of the wagon wheels. It took several hours, inching along the gloomy oblivion. When I reached the spaceship, I loaded the vase in its special docking zone, an entirely separate pod within the ship. Should the spacecraft's hull be breached, the pod would activate and its course automatically preset to find Earth. I loaded the crew next, trying not to stare into the visors where bloody, frozen bits of skull swirled behind foggy glass. The months go by. I play the events over and over in my head. The vastness of the solar system and the endlessness of space is an excellent canvas to project my memories and thoughts onto. I find myself conversing with the dead crew, with the vase. I am not insane, merely keeping myself from going so. I have spent years in isolated camping trips in remote wildernesses. This is not so different, and the way to survive is to stay stimulated with language, rather than letting the need for language take over. I write a lot as well, pen to paper. The comms don't work. Nothing does, save for the basic survival amenities. Food, exercise, waste, and air filtration, and of course the navigation and power itself. No signals, no pings, no streaming or speaking to Earth. I found this out right after lifting off from Pluto. I have no other assumption to make other than the anomaly in the vase, the arc of the galaxy, is behind this, somehow. Perhaps it can't release itself, but can still connect to other devices, project some part of itself out into the nearby material, despite those very precautions being taken. Then again, it was all speculation, accounting for even the most fringe theories and adding fail-safes based on them. Still, the nature or lack thereof of this thing eluded our efforts, eludes me still, and I've had nothing to do but contemplate it, stare at it between dehydrated meals and zero-gravity exercise. Pluto, the Roman god of the underworld, the equivalent of Hades. Why did we name it such? Does our naming of it accurately describe the planet? Or does the planet somehow embody those qualities associated with a sense of Pluto? And what of this thing, a guardian of the planet, an angel, a demon, an alien, the god of death? Are any of those things mutually exclusive? Is an angel also an alien? Do our labels and understanding of things imbue these entities with those qualities, the same as naming Pluto after the underworld? If I call it an angel, does that really describe this being? Is it really even an entity or a being? Aren't those just placeholders for something that appears to be someone? Does this appear to be someone? I admit to feeling emotions from it. Even in this spaceship, the presence of it has entirely crept into the crenellations and panels, the buttons and gadgets, my veins and neurons. I am wrapped by it, even as it is wrapped in its own cage. I go back and forth in my head. My mission is to return this to Earth. The lives of the crew were given to this, and the entire Earth is waiting in anticipation. No doubt they have picked up the trajectory of the ship by now. They know it is on a return trip. But as I approach Jupiter, I can't help but feel myself wanting to alter the course, crash into the planet, let this vase be lost into the storm planet. I know on Earth they will be building a larger version of the vase, a proper cage, something they can seek to interact with more fully, letting it have room to materialize, testing it, experimenting, and maybe even reason with it. Does this thing want to go to Earth? I realize it could turn off the ship, but in the process probably damn itself to an eternity of drifting. Going to Earth means it has a better chance of escaping, or it can already escape and wants me to lead it back to humanity to cause havoc. I truly do not know. The possible fate of the world is in my hands. I have had years to decide, and only a few months left before Earth is in sight. Jupiter has the strongest gravitational leap, and the rest of the journey is relatively short from there, but it's also the place I can crash into. Any basic hunter knows not to lead the wolf back to his home, the wolf that devoured my 6 crew already. I thought I was committed to the mission there for a while, until my thoughts drifted to those caveman ancestors of ours. The first humans to hunt a mammoth. What did they feel? I think I know now. A great beast felled, the beginning of the end of their species. Mankind is brutal. If this is our first encounter with an alien, it took only 7 of us to capture it. There are billions of humans, a race of hunters who by their own rights have become the gods to many of those life forms who inhabit our planet. Always we speak in possessives. Like the mammoth, this being is fallen. This fallen god or fallen angel, fallen demon or fallen alien, this fallen star, fallen into the hands of humanity. Except I don't really know if it is captured. Am I even in control of myself? Does every touch of the console mean it can feel me? Does it read my thoughts, which are electrical waves, feel my pulse when the circuit of the controls meets my own? I have made my decision. My duty to the cosmos is greater than any validation of the human race. Humans united. The lesson was plain and clear. It was all in their heads, the reason they squabbled. I think it started with the mammoths. We killed a part of ourselves when we drove it to extinction, and every other life form we've vanquished. What does it say about us that we torture everything that brings us together? And this kind of mammoth may be vengeful. I am not convinced humans can truly contain it. I think we weren't meant to leave the planet, not before solving our problems first. We did not hunt the mammoth before we could catch the mouse. I will take the Camelot and do what the namesake of this starship could not, cast the Grail into the void, away from the world of man. These were my thoughts, the conclusion I came to for the sake of humanity and this being of light. Our worlds should not meet. I am going to jettison the crew, along with myself, and detach the escape pod that the vase is hooked into. We will fall together into Jupiter. By manually controlling the pod, I will be able to override the failsafe that is supposed to autopilot it towards Earth's orbit, so that it can be picked up by other astronauts. To do this, I will need to tether myself to the outside of the pod, where the emergency control panel is located. From there I can access the navigation system and alter its course to Jupiter. There is no part of the emergency pod that is accessible. It is only made to securely and indefinitely contain this vase and the being within. Of course this will mean that I will die. I am okay with that. I am going to bring my crew with me. We will all be tethered to the escape pod and so die a warrior's death. For the benefit of humanity, we will drift, not as a flag of the dead, but arm in arm, a band of hunters, of humans, united as we should always be, facing the unknown in unison. I have written this in graphite on yellow-lined paper, and stored it safely in a time capsule tucked in my spacesuit that could withstand the most hellish conditions imaginable, buried deep in the tempests of Jupiter. If you are reading this, something has gone, oh so very wrong. Love Manifesto. 2 out of these 10 things are true. 1. You must scrape your innards out for true love, otherwise it cannot enter your life. 2. After true love has wrapped itself in the tender gauze that is your leather, you can proceed to pour back everything you scraped out. 3. Freezing is recommended, but thawing isn't. Fridges are great, but it slows decay. 4. If you are intrusive, you need something other than yourself that you would die for. 5. If you are attractive, a selective diet would do good for you. 6. My stainless steel skin is stained in blood for a reason that does not rust. 7. All this could have been avoided if you had or hadn't submitted. 8. A full stomach does not always guarantee guts. 9. Sticking your neck out means nothing if the spine is weak. 10. This line is left blank deliberately for innocent reasons. Banquet of Kings. In the banquet hall of kings, the tables turn, and the throne will isolate you even as it elevates. The wheels spin within wheels. The court of kings is treacherous. Each party, each individual has a turntable. In order to retain favor, support, allegiance, authority, the tables must stay spinning. To see a table stop spinning is to lose the influence of that party. The king must balance these spinning tables which turn at different rates, each requiring unique approaches. The king must read the hearts and minds of all his or her subjects. What is it that each table wants? Their ambitions, dreams, hopes, fears. At the center of a vast interconnected web of networks, in which all energy feed into a single node, sits the king upon a throne. The regulation of the empire, the land, and the people all feed into the king's throne, the discernment of the king, and the word of the king, which is law. All lines of energy are poured into the throne, and the throne is the connection to heaven, the stars, a bridge into the king, who then distributes the energy back along the web in the optimal circuits to keep all the tables turning. The king must know who to admonish, who to publicly humiliate, demonstrating the consequences of disfavor, but knowing that it could make a lifelong enemy and adjusting the severity to the level that can be tolerated by the party in question, whether they can restore an overturned table or plot against the king. The king handles intrigue, politics, bureaucracy, administration, family drama, weather events, food stores, treasury, territories, and estates, as well as enemies, trade, allies, potential alliances, the king's own court and closest advisors, the military, and all those who the king may assign to handle these tasks. They may remove some of the workload, but that person must be skilled at those matters, trustworthy and competent should the king not have the time to manage every issue that arises. Any administrator for the king must share in the king's vision, while independent enough that they are not reliant upon the king's presence for every action taken. This creates a table that the king must turn, while that outsourced table spins in other, so that there are wheels interlocking their teeth in one another, constantly in motion. The gear teeth, if aligned to their proper use, the right speed, the correct spacing and timing along with the precise fit, the momentum can carry itself and progress moves along with ease and efficiency. The satisfaction of seeing results and being part of the flow brings fulfillment, and the table spins for longer and with less effort to bring its impetus back to a steady speed. Tables will wobble, room may become cramped, and they grind their gears together. Tables may be filthy and rotten from the use of previous parties who did not uphold their basic role or were neglected or rebuked by the king, and therefore ostracized by the rest of the court. Planners, plotters, schemers, traitors, along with closest allies, loyal followers, adherents, partisans, all will approach the king with a smile. The king must discern those smiles from former friends who seek power to former traitors who offer their services and loyalty. Some tables are kept spinning, bought and paid for with gold alone, others with a mere acknowledgement, a kind word or compliment. Still, some need gifts of land or jewels, personal favors, simply to have their name remembered. A good king knows the names of any subject that he or she interacts with, the names of their family, and often the lineage and history of that family, or where they are from should they be newly joined to the kingdom. The king's domain extends as far as the king can maintain the levels of wheels and gears. A king may attempt to incorporate more tables, expand their reach. A king who is inheriting a kingdom may have to reduce in size, or risk being overwhelmed if they are not up to the task. Therefore it is also the responsibility of the king to look to the future in preparing the banquet hall for the next in line, seeing how the tables are turning now and where they will be in the future, who will rise in the ranks, getting a seat closer, and who will fall from grace, who future rivals and enemies may be, and potential new allies. The tables never stop spinning, and if the current king cannot maintain the demands of the wheel, they will be thrown off, discarded, cast into obscurity and failure. Even in starting a new kingdom, the king grows and demonstrates the divine abilities, reinforces the reason why he or she is king and no one else is suited, though many may try to thwart and sabotage or take the crown and throne for themselves. Some may do it because of their own ambitions, believing they are more capable or that they want the power and treasury and status, or even the legacy that being a king may ascribe. These feelings must be managed, recognized ahead of time, like a vine that is growing must be cut before it strangles the king. Some may betray the king simply because the table stops spinning. They feel wronged or abandoned, not given their due diligence, what they are owed. The king is expected to take the blame should a decision go wrong, a calamity befall the people, a dispute break out, resources distributed unfairly. The king mediates arguments, arbitrates the law, and judges the actions. The king is the navigator, the driver, the shepherd, the wisest, most shrewd, cunning, strongest, and has the most vitality. The king bears the weight of all the dreams of his or her people. But to serve is to lead, the one who forges the path, the one who keeps the gears in motions and tables turning, even when the tables turn against the king. Therefore the king must be unforgiving, except when it is the optimal course to forgive. The king is ruthless, direct, and so talented. The king will constantly have to prove why they occupy the throne. Even when things are moving in flow and the realm is thriving, some may ask why the king is even needed, for they do not have the perspective of the king's throne, to know every table the king balances, whose absence would eventually cause the seizing up of all the moving parts. The king must know from other perspectives that do not see from the chair. The king knows every trade, craft, and talent, or at least is competent in these enough to recognize the talent or lack thereof in those who will be commissioned. The king knows these things simultaneously with the state of the realm, the neighboring kings, the will of the heavens, and the moving of the tides. The king is keen and sharp, relentless and prodigious. They must be, for this role is the most difficult in the entire world if it is to be successful. It has to be, for success breeds jealousy and weakness breeds scavengers, and so there is no winning. Only the tables that can be kept spinning, and the spinner who sits at the center of the web, for the throne must be occupied as energy accumulates around the nexus of networks. The one who puts crown to head plays this game, the rise and fall of empires. The king is fully synesthetic, able to process senses at a level beyond the average person, beyond even artists and poets, though their skill will unlikely be any of those. Their senses come from the afferent signals given off by every event, and the flood of information the king is receiving at the middle of the network, on their seat of power. They must understand things before they happen, see traitors before they have even changed their loyalty, see allies where there are rivals, and unused cogs where there is potential. The king can create roles for everyone within the domain, and therefore has the vision and sensory knowledge of the collective public will. The king must let it grow organically and shape it, applying the right balance of both, removing what is bad, planting seeds where it is best to. A king who does not make enemies is weak. A king who cannot defeat the enemies they have created is a fool. A king that can only function in peace is worthless, and a king who desires only war will collapse. The king must change like the seasons, yet be as eternal as a mountain. The king is the divine connection between earth and heaven, yet must remain the lowest of all those within the domain of the kingdom. The unjust king deserves to be deposed. The righteous king requires wit to stay alive. The thriving king must expect to be overthrown one day. Who is ruthless to those who attempt, yet the conditions are created that should someone be successful, the kingdom will be in good hands, as only one who is truly skilled and worthy can ascend to the throne. Like bulls fighting for the lead, the strongest naturally prove themselves. Though in your life you may not be crowned king over an empire, the tables are always turning, and social dynamics, relationships, responsibilities, legal matters, work, creative outlets, health, and the panoply of culture that follows participation in existence, which is mandatory. The wheels spin, and you can find the gears that line up with the teeth, where the momentum is perpetuating itself, and it's easier to keep tables spinning than to restart spinning, but so too is spinning a table too fast a cause for concern. Dedication to one single area in a desperate bid will see the table fly off the handle. There is a sweet spot to every table, and how it is balanced, the weight distribution, the material, the airflow, the resistance, the sturdiness of its base. Understand each table and its gears and teeth and what it connects to along the web of spinning wheels, and the energy which transfers across around and around, to and from. Study the timing, the harmony, the gravity, the force, the push and pull. This is what it takes to be a king. The banquet hall is set, for the court is always holding a masquerade ball with its dancing dancers and spinning rumors and masked liars with knives in the dark and secrets in the day. And to be king is to be the best liar, the best dancer, the source of rumors, and the spinner of tables. You orchestrate and conduct, you plot and you counter, you cater to every need, but you influence what the needs will be, anticipate them, manipulate them into needing what you can offer already. You utilize discarded assets and maximize lessons learned. Individuals from different tables may have wildly opposed ideals, creeds, background, may be doing unrelated work and lifestyles to other tables, and you must adjust to each one accordingly. Not because the king is a chameleon, nor should you be, but because in seduction and manipulation, strategy and intrigue, there is a pace to set that will see the others move to your beat, and the king makes the rhythm, sets the tempo and pace. The king sees the timing and waits for the opportune moment, when to approach, when to deny, when to accept, when to gift, when to take, when to make others feel useful, when to establish boundaries, how to see what's best, and to plant ideas. The king watches as a million moving parts find their routes, and like strumming the armrests of the throne, plays them all as if through a piano, tapping the fingers and sending sparks to control the beat, because the king sees all the tables moving, and sees how to best arrange them. At the banquet of kings, the one who can wear the most masks will rule, but the one whose mask is maskless will be a true king. The king is the ultimate server at the restaurant of life and death, whose law is that of the wild, devour or be devoured. Wear the mask, turn the table, change masks, move to the next, and at day's end, prepare to do it again. The juggling is never ending. The wheels turn round and around. Heed the psychology of chairs for each seat, each position and orientation, the placement and design, the style, all must be considered. As master of ceremony, all details are participants, all have their effects, and the king of chairs is the throne. There are more than human guests at the banquet of kings. The flaming chariot angel throne of the green phosphine, the basis for all religions and mystic experiences here. The seat of power is the central nexus from where the innervation of the land feeds into, veins of energy that connect to the throne. Regulation is dispensed from this king of chairs, arteries that feed back into the land. The throne is the beating heart of the land, and the connection to the tables are ley lines. And the king sitting upon the throne must make contact with the gods in heaven, through the chariot wheels of the phosphine angel, in order to access the magnetic synchronization of nervous system and the energy of the land, the king's will and the people, in other words, to have the strongest dreams. But what if you are not king yet? The current king is weak, the tables are wobbling, and no one recognizes this, or they simply do not have what it takes to rise to the occasion, or the hungry eyes of vultures seek to pull apart the wealth of the land. How do you move up the ranks, acquire friends and allies, put down enemies, receive the favor of the court, have the king's ear? It is a dangerous game, to play usurper, but to make it everyone else's idea. To become king at the previous king's will, to give ideas to but avoid credit, convinces others among the court that it was their idea to do this or that. You must play puppet master long before you ever become king. You must not brag nor show off unduly. You must not reveal your hand nor express too much knowledge, especially in someone's territory, in their genre. You must ask questions, allow people to talk about themselves, become trustworthy but not a blank canvas. Strike the balance between being helpful, offering advice, but not the solution. The solution must always appear to come from their own party. You are a shadow king, moving silently between the tables to make them spin. You acquire their secrets and safeguard them. You see the yarn left behind by the movement and activity of every member of each table. And those tables, which are different areas of life, contain people who interact with the table differently. You start with no table, attached to nothing, for that would keep you from moving like a wraith between tables. Your goal is not to be given a table, not to be a cog in a wheel, but the one who spins. Attention is only good in small moments, the right reputation. You cannot be overly moral, nor obviously notorious. Strike the balance of intrigue and mystique with public rapport, a balance that is based on the tables in play. Slowly you will rise through the tables, each orbit of tabletop propelling you further into the next circle, where you continue to adjust and sojourn between the worlds and the problems and dramas of those tables. Finally, you have found yourself in the king's court, a perfect play, and all are influenced and their lives improved, and they turn to you and crown you as king, the coronation to begin the golden age. It is there, ascended to the throne at long last, where this can be achieved, to drink from the everlasting chalice, which is to be one with the land, the secret that has been lost. When all the tables are spinning in unison, the sconces on the walls will flicker in flashing technicolor, the brooms begin their dance across the halls, the cutlery serves the never-ending feast as living agents, in abundance that triggers a jackpot. Golden age starts, the cornucopia appears, and laurel wreaths are tossed in jubilees of dancing divines, while gold rain showers, and the wine like river flows. That is the puzzle and gamble, the rhyme and lottery of the game of kings. To merge heaven and earth in fantasia harmony by connecting every rhythm into symphonic waltz. In the banquet of kings thy cup spilleth over, until thy cup runneth empty. You will command all the king's horses, and the shouts of the masses will echo from the hall into the world of stars above. Long live the king, long live the king, long live the king. How to raise a phoenix. How would you raise a phoenix, knowing its death leads to a rebirth, knowing that it will outlive you? How does a mortal raise someone that is immortal? Do you rail against the unfairness of it, saying, Why should I be chosen to raise an immortal? Should not the undying being raise me? I, a mortal, whose life is already fleeting, and whose dreams are seldom fulfilled, do not have the time. How can one whose life is spent waiting for death take care of the deathless? Do you let the phoenix go? Do you think that it is too much responsibility, that humans are not meant to possess something so mythical? Will you send the phoenix out to the world unraised, without support, washing your hands from burden? You justify to yourself that nature will figure it out, that it was a fluke the phoenix should land in your hands in the first place. Its affairs are not yours to meddle with, so you let it slip away, all the things you could be and do. You take on the life of one who is too small to participate in such a big world. You turn your back on the phoenix, free from responsibility, a coward always. Do you approach the phoenix as a religion? The phoenix is a deity, an eternal being whose worship may grant favor and fortune and the promise of joining the birds' endless flight in the afterlife. The phoenix is the end-all, be-all, and must be guarded with your life, its secret preserved by an elect few. It must be hidden away, deep underground, where no one can take your god. You shield the phoenix from the world, from experience, from life. Caged in some dark and hidden place, its beauty is for your eyes only, its power promised to you, its fire will warm only you. In the hopes of receiving a touch of its immortality in a life beyond this one, you bury the phoenix in a cold and wet dungeon that you convince yourself is a holy place. Will you raise the phoenix in the lab? Will you study and test it, trying new medicines, extracting cells, postulating that its immortality can be a benefit for mankind? The phoenix would make the perfect test subject, the perfect control study. Any novel invention of medicine and technology can be administered to the phoenix with no fear of repercussion. You tell yourself it is for the greater good, that disease can be cured, and unhappiness, and pain, and death. You can make heaven on earth. You just need time to experiment on the phoenix, and these dreams of immortality can be shared across the human race. It has all its endless life to recover from torture, if only you can bottle up its immortality and inject it into every human. You're so close, it's just around the corner. You can almost taste it. No, that didn't work either. Maybe one more experiment. Is the phoenix sold for wealth? The phoenix is immortal and should not mind lending its body so that you and your family and friends may live in comfort and luxury in this brief existence of life. You decapitate its head, and tear feather from wing, and sever claw from limb, and dismantle eye from socket, and these pieces of the phoenix are sold to the wealthy as rarities and oddities of art, and a token of immortality. Its head is mounted onto the wall of the homes of those who can afford a trophy of something timeless, a reminder that perhaps wealth one day can purchase the same endless existence. The irony of what happens to those who can be reborn upon death lost on you, as you stared to the statue made from 1,000 corpses of its skeleton resting like a bust upon the mantle of your palace, paid for in phoenix hearts. You never stop to think, if you obtained the immortality you so desperately want, that someone else would tear your body apart and sell them as idols for wealth in a museum of stolen life and fossilized phoenix flame. Can the phoenix be raised to solve world hunger? You butcher the phoenix because it will be reborn. You give its flesh out to feed the hungry and poor. We can share in this meal for the people who are unable to eat, for those oppressed and robbed and beaten down by the powers that be. If we do not want for food, then the days of war and poverty are gone, and we can make earth an Eden once more. But can one immortal being be sacrificed to feed the appetites of an entire species? If you do not try, even if you can only feed one extra mouth, one person who is cold and whose belly is empty, wouldn't that mean that you were doing your part to help the world? To bring down an endless life so that suffering can be equalized, to make a godly being descend to earth. You tie your butcher apron and put on fireproof mask and sharpen your knife. What you do is justified, you tell yourself. Every flaming burst of its body is justice in an unjust world. Its eyes look at you, not accusing, not even pleading, merely blank. You, who were its caretaker, hacking away at it over and over again, and the people demand so much food. Would you raise the phoenix to be strong, to make a weapon out of it? You, who knows the cruelty of the world and the savagery of nature, you must train it in the ways of war and the hunt, to kill it so that it may learn of methods to defend itself, teach a friend from foe, guide it to swoop down and harm those who could harm it first. You can conquer other countries. It can bring about greatness to your homeland, that your way of life, which is superior, may be spread among those barbaric others. The world is us versus them. You instill into the phoenix that if your enemy has a phoenix, they will do the same. So you must race to raise the deadliest phoenix, and let its fire scorch your enemies. Do you raise the phoenix as a philosopher? Do you seek answers to life and the universe and your place in it, and the plight of man and the tragedy of death, and these answers which, if you knew, would bring about peace and fulfillment and joy, and the world could celebrate having found meaning? You must kill the phoenix. You must take its life, watch its rebirth, and kill it again. You must observe and ponder and contemplate every moment of its death throes and the flame of its resurrection. You must see the very end of immortality, push the limits of the limitless, break the endless, because in that moment the truth will be revealed, one in which you can say, "Aha, I was right, there is nothing." The haggard bird with haunted eyes, whose memory extends back to the first death, is killed and killed again, until its immortality is more painful than the mortal whose single bleak death approaches. The human, the lover of wisdom, will die, and along with him the immortal phoenix. For wisdom is to be held if it is to be understood, and that understanding could make the difference, what separates humans from the savagery of nature. And the phoenix casts an anguished glance your way, yet through the tortured husk of its body, the phoenix who is placed into your hands as caretaker remains absolutely loyal. It has never known anything else. From the moment of its hatching it has been cut down. That is life for the phoenix. All that the immortal being in its infinite potential has experienced, a strange state between death and rebirth to satiate an answer that was predetermined by the very ethos of the question. To ask for the meaning of life is to kill an immortal bird, to confirm an emptiness inside, a pit of nothing behind the gutless body of a philosopher. The whole time the meaning was the means of life that you lived, and you spent it asking how to die. Or, do you raise the phoenix as a monster? Do you take it apart piece by piece, let it rebirth, and sew its wounds back onto it, to build 10,000 bodies in one, wings that unfurl to darken the skies, and flames so furious to brighten them again, each feather stitched with working eyes, each eye blazing in hatred, 10,000 hearts pumping into the one iteration of its birth, chosen to carry every scar, every death into a single being of perfect creation, and from its ashes let it loose to seek revenge upon the world that tortured it into existence, to make an abomination out of innocence, a monster out of machines, an inferno out of an angel, O herald of sacred revenge. How would you raise a phoenix, knowing the day will never come that you can experience its immortal life? The phoenix will carry on your story, the lessons you gave to it, the care you showed, the experience it shared with you. You will shape it forever and forever. Every scar you place in its memory, every hurtful thing you did or the kindness taught, the example you set, the guidance you shared, whether you took the phoenix for your own gain or gave it all that you could. An immortal being requires the perspective of one whose existence is brief, and the mortal needs something bigger than itself to fight against the futility and fear of the end. The two together can make companions. The immortal cannot learn on its own, but does not die. The mortal can learn, but cannot live forever. The immortal is complacent and unchanging on its own. The mortal changes and evolves. Each have something the other may not obtain on its own. Do you break it or mend it, that relationship which is passed down from offspring to offspring? The relationship of the ever-living world that is itself a phoenix, with its fiery sun reborn every day. And there are beings who are mortal to you, and you are immortal to them, and you are mortal to those who live beyond you, just as they are to that which exists beyond them. A beetle whose life is a flash to you, and a tree who will outlive you, and the soil that will outlive the tree, and the mountain which will outlive the soil, and the ocean that will outlive the mountain, and the sun which will outlive the ocean. Would you wait for something never to arrive? Would you spend time with an insect, knowing its life may be mere hours long? It decided to go to you. That means something, to the insect at least, whose lifespan, which is short to you but a life lived to it, and shared that experience with you, found you fascinating, interesting, wanted to explore and see you. Would you plant a tree knowing you will not find rest under its shade in your lifetime? Would you take oil, the blood of the earth, and spill it for your own sake and convenience? Would you take gold from the earth to adorn your body? Or would you transmute base metal into gold, not for thought of gain, but to replenish the earth of its pillaged precious veins of ore? How would you treat the children and animals and plants and insects of the world, knowing they will outlive you, knowing that their memory is passed down as the story of how they lived and died for the context of the next born? Could you watch for something never to happen? Would you fight for something you will never see come to pass? Would you teach your skills to something that cannot hear? Would you share colors to those who do not see, shine a light to those in the dark? Would you plant a garden for the sake of giving life to an ecosystem that doesn't feed you, but for the home of other beings? Would you protect the weak against the oppression of the strong? Would you summon the rains for the parched to bring security without reward? Would you play a concert for animals, for the land, for the sake of adding music? Knowing that the immortal bird is the life that you live in an everlasting world, the story that you tell to those who live beyond you, the dreams you dream and the wishes you fulfill. Knowing the journey is harsh, would you repair the trail you walked, restore the firewood you used, replant the seeds you took, heal the damage you did? Will you free the enslaved and the tortured? Will you use the products of dismemberment, the tools of severing, the food of industry, the textiles of punishment, the fuel of pillaging, the medicine of abuse? Could you damn the world and yourself for the sake of a loved one's life? How would you raise a phoenix? Solver. I'm telling you, I'm getting nothing, came the exasperated cry from Joseph Romano, fed up with frustration. He switched some outputs, and the speakers blared out the static that ruined the researchers' attempt to map the ant colony with radar. The Brazilian heat, poorly combated by an errant portable AC unit, only inflamed Joseph's irritation. On the screen, the digital mapping abruptly turned into a mess. I don't understand. What does it mean? Vicky, the youngest grad student, asked. I don't know what it means. We're in the middle of nowhere, so there shouldn't be any radio interference. Easy, Lei said, refocusing the energy into productivity. Let's pivot and talk about what we are experiencing. As the professor and team lead, she easily slipped into a Socratic method whenever the students ran into a problem. Joseph threw up his hands, briefly revealing the large sweat stains under his arms. Radio interference is blocking the ground-penetrating radar. And, Lei implored, so we can't map the leafcutter colony, and this is all a waste of time. There's radio interference. What does that tell us? Vicky adjusted her eyeglass frames. They were a little large for her face, but gave her a stereotypical bookish image that paired with her personality. There's a device giving off radio waves. Underground? Lei snapped her fingers. Exactly. Something is creating interference from within the ant colony. Let's find it. What? How? We don't have a map thanks to the interference to the GPR. Joseph's surliness only increased. Feeling the heat wear into her own patience, Lei was a little more direct. Think about it. We're studying the universality of tunnel construction and path planning among different ant species. We already used LiDAR to plot the entrances for this colony, so run that data into our model and run the AI simulation to map the most likely construction. Vicky asked, but what are we looking for? If there's a device buried, based on the interference pattern, it has to be in a colony structure. Joseph's tone had lost some of the edge as he warmed to the idea of a solution to his frustration. We limit our research to the area where the interference is highest and send an endoscopic probe to look for whatever's causing the jamming. With clear instructions, everyone got to work. They fed the field computers locations of the large earthy entrance mounds and the small portion of the GPR they succeeded mapping before the interference proved too disruptive. With this data, the simulation should be able to predict the most likely area and help narrow their search from 1,500 chambers to several candidates, saving immeasurable amounts of time with the endoscopic probe. The AI program took an hour to process the data and run simulations before landing on the most likely scenario, generating a complex 3D model of a twisting Byzantine structure akin to a city, which Lei always found awe-inspiring. The depth of these insect megalopolises could be 30 feet deep and cover 6,000 square feet with all the same needs a human hive would require, such as farms, ventilation shafts, nursery chambers, waste storage, and large transport tunnels, highways for the commuting ants. What would life be like as one ant amongst the countless millions scurrying underground, tirelessly working their job, but without any of the conflict and chaos that came from people? The leafcutters had no concept of internal divisions or social inequality, no coups for power or violent revolutions. They worked and lived a single, united purpose. Let's see what we find. The endoscopic probe was a traditional tool of exploration, a simple camera at the end of dozens of feet of coil wire. The students carefully maneuvered it through the tunnels, pushing and twisting to turn with the earth, all navigated by Lei referencing the computer model. Once the initial ants recognized no threat from the probe, they quickly ignored it, and the countless drones worked around, paying no heed to the harmless alien device. The 3D model wasn't perfect, and it misplaced several chambers, but generally it was accurate enough so that it only took an hour of searching at the second opening to find the likely source of the radio interference. A yard under the surface, in a medium-sized chamber, about 4 feet across, where the leafcutter ants deposited the eponymous leaves to cultivate the fungus they farmed for food, was an unmistakably non-ant-made box lying near a rear wall close by another access tunnel. With perplexed faces pressed close to the screen, teasing out every detail from the faint white glow of the endoscopic probe's light, the researchers wondered aloud at the curious item. Lay decided to grab it. Excavating the item was a far less simple job, but with sure hands and the rest of the day they carefully dug into the colony, collapsing as few tunnels and chambers as possible to reach the right one. They succeeded after sunset when the summer night began to cool the tropical air. After a quick brushing, Joseph placed the box onto a tray in the middle of the group, eating a simple dinner meal of spaghetti. Here it is. Vicky adjusted her glasses. It doesn't look like much. It's warm, too. They had to agree. The box was small, 4 inches cubed with an interesting shade of green that wasn't quite blue enough to be teal, nor vibrant as jade. The cube's edges were distinct, but without stitches, and no indication of how it pieced together, as if made of one mold. But certainly the source of the radio noises had to be somehow inside such a small container. "I don't see any latches," Joseph mumbled through a mouthful of noodles, red sauce staining the corner of his mouth. He tapped a couple sides with his fingernails before sitting back. "How's it supposed to open?" "Is it supposed to open?" Vicky replied, chewing on a nail in thought. On one side of the cube was a pair of purple dots, slight bumps on an otherwise sterile surface. Lay ran a finger softly over the bumps once, then again with the barest of pressure. Pop. The noise was not loud, but its suddenness startled the group, and Vicky's strangled yelp in reaction made her face color red. Lay couldn't blame her. The surprise caught her breath, too. A faint wisp of smoke, barely discernible, rose as the top edge of the cube popped off. Rushing over, Joseph nearly choked on his food as he cussed, all 3 nearly bumped heads peering down at the unexpected opening. Inside the strange cube was nothing, just the faintest indentations of lines along the walls, lines which had no discernible function or pattern. Joseph muttered, "That's anticlimactic." "What are you playing with in your hand?" Dr. Maburu's gravely voice asked, his heavy brow knitted as he tried to look at the details through the poorly lit video call screen. Lay was at home on a conference call with her colleague, unaware that she had once again absently fiddled with the green cube. Since finding the strange object 2 months ago, Lay had yet to find a good answer as to what it was. It bothered her, and often she carried it around, running it through her fingers, hoping for osmosis to give her some kind of explanation. Its innate warmth was often oddly soothing, too. She paused, then pinched the cube with pointer and thumb, centering it in the cameras so Dr. Maburu could have a clear look. "It was the oddest thing," Lay began. She recounted the discovery of the strange item during her latest field expedition, but no sooner had she started than Dr. Maburu exclaimed, throwing deep wrinkled hands in the air. He could not move well these days, but he still nearly shot out of his chair, leaving the camera frame in excitement. Lay called after him, looking at the camera in different angles as if the perspective would change so she could see where he went. Dr. Maburu came back in a shambling hurry, but he didn't say anything until he settled into his chair, adjusted the webcam to fix the angle, despite nothing changing it from earlier. At last, he presented with a hearty aha, a green cube of his own. "Oh," Lay squeaked, "where did you get that?" He answered, "From a former student. He was studying a species of doralus in western Kenya half a year ago when he found this. He presented to me in case I had ever seen anything like it, or why it would be in an antechamber. I have searched for explanations since." "What did you learn?" He chuckled. "Nothing at all. I had almost forgotten about it until you showed me yours, but I see yours is different than mine. I only have 1 dot. Indeed, right in the center of one face was the small purple dot. Both biologists looked at the other's cube through their screens. "Did you just press it open?" Lay asked. "Not quite. I certainly tried multiple times, but it only opened after I held it down for 5 seconds. Weird that it is a different mechanism to open. So weird." "I have been where you are now, my dear," Dr. Maburu said. "Have you heard of this old joke before? A dog entered a tavern and said, 'I can't see a thing. I'll open this one.'" After a moment she shook her head. "No, and I don't understand it either." He softly clapped his hands. "Exactly. No one understands it. It is an ancient Sumerian joke preserved through the centuries, and while scholars can read it, we shall never truly decipher it. The punchline is gone with the people who imagined it. All we have is a written echo. I know you shall spend much time on this object, but be willing to accept certain mysteries are beyond solving." Lay studied the cube, reflecting on the mentor's advice. Such an odd object, so enigmatic, sitting in the palm of her hand like an ancient talisman dedicated to a forgotten god, studied by modern anthropologists, trying to piece the barest of clues to its purpose, but ultimately never rewinding time far enough for the true answer. Except in that instant, Lay resolved to find the answer, for this was not some antique heirloom. No, it was a modern device capable of broadcasting radio waves. The purpose of this cube existed, and she would solve this riddle. Lay took a deep breath, steadying herself before stepping on stage. It was strange, feeling this nervous at a public speaking event. The last 15 years of teaching classes, participating in conferences, and other mining speaking events had given her a lot of practice, but this was on a whole other level. The auditorium had seating for several thousand people, and one of the admins had plainly stated that every single seat was filled, not to mention the hundreds of thousands of people watching on the streaming broadcast. Inadvertently, she found herself in the center of a zeitgeist, and its attention was beyond her comfort zone. Never had she prepped for a crowd in a private room before, able to sit before a large mirror with bright lighting to highlight every flaw in her face and imperfection in her skin. While she did not have harsh wrinkles, her cheeks had gotten plump from middle age. It also extended to her stomach, and wisps of gray freely frolicked with her normal black hair. It was strange prepping her makeup and reviewing notes in such an unusual environment, and that weight of expectations unexpectedly struck her, so she nervously sipped at water to quench a dry mouth that felt like the Sahara Desert. Now Lay tepidly waited at the side of the stage, hidden from the large crowd, whose presence one could feel while the MC finished the opening remarks. The crowd was an enormous beast waiting to devour her, she bleakly felt. The MC finished the prologue and the introductions began. The other core researchers on this makeshift team that developed organically, one by one, walked onto the stage, waving at the clapping crowd. They were mathematicians, chemists, physicists, and metallurgists, all bringing unique perspectives to a grand mystery. At last, the MC called out Lay's name, the final one, the linchpin whose relentless pursuit of understanding caused them all here. With a deep breath and a reassuring look at the encouraging Vicky and Joseph, she strode to the stage with butterflies fluttering wildly in her gut. Upon sitting in the center of the long table on the stage, behind her nameplate, with her notes prepped on the table and a single glass of water, Lay spent a moment readjusting everything, although nothing was out of place, so she could center herself. "Thank you all for the warm reception," Lay began after a delicate cough. "I never imagined that our search, which began 18 months ago, would create such interest in the general public. When we found the first cube in a fungus chamber in a colony of Amoimerex sylvestri, it was simply a strange oddity, and never could I have guessed the odyssey that would spring from the discovery." Lay finished the abridged recap of events that led to the spiraling search for understanding, how after consulting with Dr. Mabru it led her to share her curiosity in a group chat with other biologists, and unexpectedly they too began finding these strange cubes, always buried in the dark, moist chambers of ant colonies. Primarily, the cubes lurked in layers across 3 types of ants: the supercolonies of Leinpathema humile, the fungus-farming leafcutter ants of the tribe Attini, and the large carpenter ants Camponotus japonicus. Of course, we have yet to fully understand why, in particular, these species. However, they are the most developed societies of ant species, Lay explained. Slowly, but with increasing widening attention, this originally biologist riddle drew in experts from other fields. Lay and her colleagues started reaching out to mathematicians as the cubes became harder to open. First, there was a single dot mechanism to open, then 2, and 10, then 12, 20, and lastly 60. The combinations to open became more complex with each new find. For a while, all progress in opening a cube stymied, until the mathematician Matt LaRoche joined the burgeoning team. A picture of the hardest-to-solve cube flashed on the screen, as Matt relayed this part of the investigation. As you can see, this cube has 60 dots, which became the final configuration of cubes we've found, and what had stumped us for a while. The dozens of tiny purple dots were not neatly organized in rows or columns, but in a spiraling 6-point asterisk, with pairs of dots outlining the shape. There had already been several weeks of attempts by the time I became involved. Luckily, their efforts allowed me the opportunity to explore unconventional avenues, always witty and charming, and not in an academic sense, for Matt LaRoche was at ease with everyone. The mathematician was quick to provide the story. It is funny what triggers a eureka in your mind. I'd say this rivals Archimedes, but you can all be the judge. We had been doggedly looking for a solution for weeks, with no luck, when a side comment from Dr. Lee, just flashed a thought which turned out to be the breakthrough we needed. As he said the story, he gave her a little wink, probably imperceptible to the crowd due to his position on the panel table, but it still made Lay flush. Mathematicians should not be so charming, nor handsome with such curly, soft hair. From the crowd someone shouted, "What did she say?" Matt wore an easy smile, baiting the audience questions so he could tell them. "She said, 'Don't look at me, Matt. I can't count above 10. Lay bore the laughter from the crowd with only a slight blush on her cheeks. She pointedly refused to look at his direction to maintain composure. At last, the crowd quieted to continue. That innocuous statement triggered a deep rabbit hole, where I realized, eventually, that it was a base 60 counting system, similar to the ancient Sumerians, the origin for 60 seconds in a day, and so forth. This particular cube required an input of the first 4 digits of pi in a counterclockwise rotation. If we overlay the number sequencing of our base 10 digits, you see the correct sequence of 3, 8, 29, 44. Simple, right? And it only got more complicated from there. Finally, the research team were solving the combinations. The base 60 appeared the most common system. It was during this time that the public became involved. Some of the researchers, frustrated and lost, had posted to social media and posts and short videos about the items. Dedicated pages grew where the latest news and challenges received exponentially higher views. The more interest garnered more resources. Every cube unlocked caused the same events. The faint wisp of smoke and the trace of interior lines. Somehow, simply opening the device triggered the same self-destruction. Lei and the team focused on exploring the contents before the device opened. They enlisted all kinds of specialists. The radio interference from the cubes was well known, though incomprehensible to understanding the signal. However, that was only the tip of the iceberg. X-rays couldn't penetrate the dense walls of the cubes. Lei enlisted the help of metallurgists and chemists to understand the composition. Again, more questions than answers. The walls were a polymer that baffled the experts. No one, at the time, could make such complicated molecular structures, combining carbon fibers with tungsten and other materials, so the cubes became impenetrable. We are getting very close to reproducing the exact material makeup of the cubes, Wei Zhang, the lead metallurgist, announced. Studying the molecular structure has propelled our industry by 20 years. We are very excited to be on a breakthrough that will transform every facet of what is possible to create, especially in the aerospace industry. The buzz it generated was large, but it would pale in comparison to other findings. As the chemists and physicists began explaining the cubes, prior to opening, displayed unusual characteristics that pointed to one conclusion. The cubes emitted heat, an impressive amount considering the heat-resistant capabilities of the encasing polymer. Additionally, detection of specific gamma rays and neutrons led many to suspect that whatever internal components produced the dozen different types of electromagnetic signals was powered by cold fusion. The recent claims, announced prior to this conference, had exponentially increased the discourse around the mysterious objects. Many scientists around the world discredited the claims and evidence, referring it as a modern-day Pons-Fleischmann scandal. However, Lei knew that various governments had reached out to their citizens that comprised her global team of investigators. While all governments disavowed responsibility for the cubes, they all remained avid participants in unlocking the secrets. For good reason. The technologies hinted by the cubes promised a revolution in energy and construction, and Lei knew her team was getting close. Wei Zhang promised he was close to developing a method of drilling through the polymer without triggering its self-destruction mechanism. Before we move on to the formal question portions of this conference, Lei said, "We would like to share a cube that has not been opened before." She withdrew a case from her purse, removed the cube nestled within, and placed it on the table, where cameras broadcasted and presented a close-up of the object. Like all recent discoveries, it had 60 dots and a spiral asterisk. Lei touched the warmth, a brief smile flickering on her face. The last 2 years had been a whirlwind of frustration and excitement, but this ancient Sumerian joke would be solved in the near future. The more of these we find, the harder, more complex the solutions. We've had to use complicated equations, theorems, and proofs to solve, but for this last one, we believe the solution is simply the Fibonacci sequence in base 60, so I will input the numbers, starting center to tip, then counterclockwise. If we're wrong, then Matt will have to quickly figure out a new solution. Alright, ready everyone? Here we go. The data is compromised. It is your fault. The location should have been deeper, not easily accessible. We need more observations of fertilization times and spore development. That was the deepest chamber in the colony. Your combination was Spawn's play. Hanging in space, floating in the void on the dark side of the moon, invisible to all but the eyes of God. The spaceship's inhabitants argued passionately. Another of their recording devices had been breached, necessitating another immediate containment protocol, naturally ruining the meager data it had collected. The first astronaut rounded on the second, frenzied with anger and violence. Its 6 neural cortexes united in violent impulses. Murder was in the air, or rather combat, as the second reacted with like intention. In fairness, it was a small miracle that neither had killed the other yet. Once again, like previous times, they were abruptly stopped. The third astronaut, aged and exhausted, held up 2 tendrils. The vulgar gesture stopped the other 2 in surprise. They turned their 2 pair of eyes at their senior, the de facto lead of this small expedition, while each third pair situated on the side of the being's large segmented craniums directed most of the other limbs back into monitoring the spaceship's systems, the immediate consensus for violence temporarily displaced. Whenever 2 Grippons meet, there are 3 fights. The third intoned an old proverb. It bore the truth of that on its own body. Fights in its youth took 1 eye, mangled 2 limbs, and scarred its body many times. Unlike the younger two, this grippon was in the life cycle stage where natural instinct demanded finding a dark place to hibernate until expiration. However, it fought that need, a battle that left it with little energy to participate in the grippon's usual fare of violence upon each other. Our probes are capturing little data. Before we can retrieve them, they are abducted by the bipeds and broken into. We must bury them deeper, the first declared. Immediately the second rebutted. That does not solve our problem. Our devices must be more secure. If the bipeds could not open them, then they would leave them alone and our research could continue. Already the two grippon's rage resurfaced. How quickly we come to violence, the elder one reflected. Always ready to savage another rather than cooperate. What is our mission? He asked the other two. We seek to understand the harmony and discipline of the hexapods, they answered. Before we destroy ourselves, the elder concluded. Even now, Rishiak's fractures from internecine conflict. Once the moon is destroyed, will our planet be next? Then our species? Remember why we are here, to learn how to live together. The other two, chastised, lowered their bulbous bodies, even as their sinuous limbs checked instruments and monitored a dozen readings. The lecture continued. We must learn their mysteries, how a million beings can live in perfect harmony within the cramped quarters of their home. We cannot gather enough data because of the constant interference of the bipeds. Every attempt is intercepted, and no matter how deep or complicated the probes are. The elder mulled its thoughts quietly, struggling to verbalize the decision it had made several solar cycles ago, and a course of action it had worked on in secret. The bipeds are no different than us, albeit far more primitive and rudimentary. They are simply a barrier to our critical research. If grippons have any opportunity to overcome our self-destructive nature, then we will need the knowledge of the hexapods. We are faced with a single question. How do we accomplish our time-sensitive research for the survival of our species amidst incessant interference? A cool silence descended on the astronauts, mulling over the problem in their brains. Information flicked from the elder's screen to the computers of the other two astronauts. They reviewed the information as the elder concluded. I have developed a viral pathogen designed to cripple the biped's most critical organs. With a long gestation and communicable via airways, the pathogen can spread across the planet before the first deaths are recorded. The two younger ones studied the data, murmuring, We are estimating at least 80% of expiration to all bipeds, potentially the complete eradication of the species. Yes. There it was, the simplest solution. Using advanced technology and intellect to design the perfect method to destroy all obstacles to the goal, morals and ethics cast aside. The astronauts told themselves it was important and necessary as the viral payload invisibly descended onto an unsuspecting species. In fact, for the next several weeks, as billions of bipeds died, they used most of the computing power of 6 neural cortexes to justify their actions, or rather, attempted to, for the nagging instinct persisted, that it was wrong. For the rest of their lives, the astronauts would grapple with the consequences of their decision in an inner turmoil. Beneath the dirt, in the complete absence of light, a million individual beings stopped their frenzy, recognizing that the cataclysm that had destroyed a dozen tunnels and several chambers had ended. There was no committee to investigate and assign blame, no debates on the proper way to rebuild, nor any revolutions to cast down the Queen for another who promised prevention. The astronauts and the philosophers may grapple with the clash between individual and society, burying their morals in a heap of excuses and contradictions. But the inherent strife that stemmed from species with too much self did not bother the uncaring and unknowing billions toiling in the darkness across a million different sites. In rigid discipline, the ants merely carried out their duties with single purpose, in a state of perfect harmony, completely dedicated to their tribe, to build, only building, building still. Rugs and bugs. Unroll the carpet. Refurbish the rug. When the blanket unfurls onto the ground, tell me what you packed away in the desert. Those I treasured, rolled away in a sheet of thick, tough canvas. Moths have eaten away at the fiber over years of unattended decay, preserved its precious piece under neglect. Is it safe or is it not? All I know is what I see. Fingerprints sanded by the grains of time, the telltale sign of hourglass mind. The body that inhabits will rot away with the rest of what remains, which is nothing at all. Obsolete habits I find myself back to, nothing to do but pick at the carpet tufts and their threaded tassels who line the edge. And still, the horizon never closes in on me, even through the self-betrayal of long having wished it would. Glitching the fractals. There are angels in the angles between juxtaposed perpendicular walls meeting end to end that form corners and bends, shapes and contour. The meeting place between one through line and another, when two threads touch tangle to tangle, intertwined into mangle. There are angelic beings residing in the aspects of faucets of chevron-shaped echelons where eidolon and marble mix into the illusion of motion, a sculpture ghoul, an epiphany and eponym, a mirage barrage. God out of the machine, God out of the machine, God into the mochita, and God away. It's like a crossword puzzle where every word is trouble, and every triple line spells out a three-letter message with the third letter of each word, forming an acronym of an anonymous onomatopoeia, synonym for the sound you make when you read it back to yourself. And then it hits you, the brief instance where the gradient first becomes perceptible, intangible but touchable, similar to a simile but not of a simile, opposite oracles but cooperative meanings, different divinity but matching definition. When that collision colludes, collapses into itself, an invisible flash forms for a second, then is gone, little moments going unnoticed, lithographs of digital ghosts, cousin to the shadow angels, those species of ink-born organs. Glitch angels or fractal clecks, data-moshed and folded origami pixel partitions, the Pendragon paraff, flourishing ligature of scaly birds of paradise, whose ligaments are signatures for forgery from a fire-breather's own two lips, touching in a kiss, a mirror of split personality from two asymmetric halves put on repeat for infinite affinity, a maze of misplaced colors, Mazarine and Maya, sanguine with sarcoline, verdant under vermilion. You can always find majesty in the chaos, eyes beneath the veil, treasure troves in the ditch, fairies brushing the moss, crystal quartz in the hail, angels in the glitch. The fractals are data-moshed to reveal scenes, characters, glitches. Each bears an ambidextrous, amphibious nature to be both a daemon and an angel. They are imaginative slates for the mind to create and encode based on inspiration of vague and messy pictures, stories of esoteric blurb written of them and hidden in keyword or interconnected into a story. They are a pantheon of glitches that can be formed as a basis of mental downloading to build nets within internets. You must know, if you do not know by now, that the clear net is but one of many nets across a vast cosmic web. These nets are akin to pocket dimensions, realms, domains, factions, systems, frequencies, wavelengths, vibrations. In essence, they are the combination of multiple lines forming a distinct architecture. If the pattern and shape of the net is correct, it will automatically access the net that it is, like a universal password. Upon the correct combination, unlock access to that particular fractal. The average person lives and dies in the clear net, the open net, the standard mass of activity, normal understanding, normal job, normal routines, like the marketplace, the day-to-day that keeps the hub alive and operating. And like any great bazaar, there are alleys, secret passages, temple grounds, undergrounds, rooftops, guilds, traveling caravans, and pop-up stalls, limited-time kiosks, troubadours, walls, parades. There's trade and piracy, deals and haggling, thieves and guards, magic and alchemy. There are many nets. How one engages with a net is also variable. A computer is one way to access nets, but so is certain lifestyles, beliefs, practices, ways of thinking, of being. It is why some actions are not possible for some, while others can easily perform. The net you exist in has its benefits and limitations. One might be in the dream net, while another is in the worm net. The information they come across, the experience, the reality will be different. Some ways of thinking are impossible on certain nets, while others are stronger and evolving, but may have less consistency. Religions have their own nets as well. Networking is to move between nets, forming connections and building a database. The neurons of the nervous system form these same connections, networks of nets. The right combination, the symbol or sigil, the architecture will determine the net one is participating in. Digital, neural, mycelial, aquarian, celestial, insectoid, arboreal, all form nets, glyphs that exist beyond any of those individual categories. A spider may be thinking and placing its web on the clear net, the same clear net you could be browsing, and both you and the spider are on the same cymatic wavelength pattern, accessing the same information, in the same level of energy that can transfer seamlessly from one to the other. The spider is browsing the internet with its web, and you are attracting the net, and vice versa, for the net is the same. How the spider designs its web will determine the geomantic attunement that its net will be part of. Your brain is the same as its technology. The pattern itself is the key, the architecture, the building. Nets can contain unique denizens, confidential history, exclusive knowledge, mysteries, and its own panoply of rules and paths. The nets grow with use, evolve as their participants do, and as the shifting tides and sands of time trade blows in the eternal duel. Some nets are forgotten, forlorn, and holding ancient wisdom and relics. Everything is weird and unexplored in the puzzle planet. It is only through the security of belief that all has been solved, the scale that teeters on the edge. Best it is to learn how to surf before the waves come crashing down. And in the corners of nets are the angels, available only through glitches, the hidden space between corners and alleys, the voids that are not meant to be seen except through extraordinary circumstances. Yet even all the voids can be linked as a net, the void net, and all the angels as angel net, and all the glitches as glitch net. There are fractals within fractals, just as there are games within games, and dolls within dolls. You are now equipped to learn of the warp, the glitch. It has been called 1,000 names across 1,000 cultures. In truth, each one is unique, and there's no single universal name. It develops of its own accord, and the individual's own ability. Names throughout history that may be familiar to you: the vestments of light, holy garments, the armor of God, the armor of Achilles, prayer and mantra, the astras and kavacha, the spear of Michael, the ontological armor, the spear of Lu, the Clyome Solace, spirit guides, guardian angel, Fravashi, Nikisi, witchcraft to construct fortifications, to enlist spirit beings, sacred weapons, relics, talismans, to don spirit clothing and armor, to influence reality against harm, withstand the force of storms, an imaginary friend. They are daemons in their own regard. The price is steep, to sustain living, evolving, and holographic matrices of reality-bending and will-controlled machinations, to make things run smoothly, to survive close calls, near-death experiences, survive in battle or illness or tragedy. When things work out beyond their usual ordinance, the warp or glitch is the distortion of natural laws and fateful moments, to make it when you shouldn't have. Building such a miracle machine within you is a life's work, a discrete possession, a ghost that can occupy you, speak to you, be spoken to, be sent to aid others, move into objects, cause malfunctions, to fix, slow the fall of collapse, hold where there shouldn't be any strength left. To form a will that works without your own is no small feat, and its cost is worth a lifetime, but its abilities are incredible to behold. An angel can do anything. But each is unique, spawned from the will of necessity, reaching into a deep well of life force for the need of survival to summon the warp, to build the wheelhouse and tower to launch it into existence, a starry, fiery, formless, fractured, flying throne. A second soul, a second sight, a guardian angel who guards the night, a keeper of the light. It grows as you do, requires nourishment, may exist only as a fleeting thought form, a bright moment of elucidation, but then fades forever. It may grow into its own being, an archangel, a seraphim. And some may exist longer than their formation, and perhaps they truly come from some place beyond, assigned to one who is compatible, who signs the contract or pledges a deal to a divine. The bond is unbreakable should you show valor to it, worthiness. It is building artifacts and relics, creating your own mythology, living animates that will exist beyond you. Others may encounter it and take part in its power. Still, you might catch glimpses of someone else's shade. It may wander and lose its way. It might impart in you something you need, or you to it. The angels in the glitch that warp reality to their will. The angles of two threads encountering in chance and fate. A miracle is just something good that happens when it is needed. Putting the damage on throughout life, and replacing the wounds with armor, and wielding the sword of light, and spear of wrath, and shield of thunder, and arrows of fire, and boots of speed, and cloak of invisibility, and hat of charm, and belt of strength, and ring of power, and wand of magic, and satchel of healing, and horn of plenty, and bag of dreams, and mask of the deity, and helm of the war god, and talon of the dragon. Together in the warp, the angels in the glitch, me to mine, and you to yours. Breath of the world. Fate is a path to walk, a branching mycorrhizal network of choice, consumption, decomposition. It grows maze-like, twists back on itself, inoculates into its surroundings, sprouts and spreads. Fate is a mycelium. Where you choose to emerge from the earth is its mushroom. The old gods are microorganisms, the game masters of yester. Fate is not a predetermined, destined course, but the threads of knots and yanked strings that push and pull, leverage and entangle. They are woven by one and all, the decisions made by every energetic expression, energy that can be defined as anything that causes change. Fate is the path you carve, along the road you've been put on. Your destination is where you choose it to be, even if it's nowhere at all, a drifter. Even as the ocean of all energy bobs in rhythms or crashes in waves, you can sail, navigate through the mist, but to do this you must be able to feel it. Those strings with no strings attached, when scent can become a trail, when tracks display personality, when light is full of messages and sound tells a story. Gravity is a product of fate, the identification of one feature of fate. Gravity is an attractive force, like two ships meeting in the night despite a vast open sea. That is gravity at work. The serendipity, fateful encounters and coincidences, both meaningful and not. If all is energy, and energy is change, energy can change forms. A thought or intention becomes a magnet, a signal of threads that creates gravity. A lie becomes the truth, and the truth transforms into lie. Lies that can ignite the hopeless with the fire of passion, and truth that can shred the confidence of the most noble. Fear that brings disease, and courage that can heal mortal wounds. Strength that comes from belief, and weakness that grows from self-doubt. Guidance in letting the answer reveal itself in quiet sensory focus. Time that slows to a halt when the currents of infinite possibilities and unknown worries narrow down to the silver cord of opening that you take. One can ride these gravitational fate lines, letting the momentum take them on a journey, or shake off the wrapping and reorient. Find the bearings and row against the force of storms. Part of navigation is feeling out when to pull against the gravity and when to dive in. Attraction may lead to a pitfall if this recognition is never learned. Will the storm take you into tragedy, shipwrecking you into the bay of jagged rocks, or splitting asunder your vessel with savage winds and deadly whirlpools? Will the towering tsunami throw you into obscurity and drown you in the weight of failure and weakness, or will you, with eyes ablaze, turn toward the great wave, sally forth and ride it? To begin to feel, learning navigation, pathfinding, tracking, sailing, to walk the world and breathe in the fate, there must first be the disentanglement and then the completion of the self. It starts, as mycelium does, in the underground, in the lowest wavelength of radiation, the deepest pits and farthest abyss in the bellow of the earth, vibrating and rumbling tremors and earthquaking shakes and shambling bass, a sigh of air, in and out, up and down, the connection to the world, the whole world. What a big place to connect to. This soul forge requires the metal found only within yourself, your unique ore. The journey to find it will allow for your soul-forged threads, the fire within yourself to be tempered into the jewel of your dreams. Before the birth is the tunnel, a place of terrifying shadows, hungry beasts, sickly abominations. The damp, poison air, the skeletal remains of those left to rot, the blood-stained rocks, the handprints of the past, the footfalls of distant memories, the wreckage and the wrong, the sinners and depraved, the damned and the dying. You cannot leave. There is work to be done. Most cannot survive this torment, but here, and only here, is the breath of the world. Do not exit Plato's cave. Vanquish all enemies first. You will become one with the sword. Its calling will be your song, and its martial play will be your dance. You must venture into the deepest recesses, into the treasure room. You must complete the cave, know it all, the dimensions, the challenges as map and territory. Conquer the underworld. Do not run or escape from it, for it is time to dance. Everyone can dance. Here you must become a warrior, cleave and cut, behead the denizens and emerge victorious. Survive and let loose. The sword will become an extension of your body. No, rather you will become an extension of the blade. It is the quest to be completed before ascending. Without the sure footing of having walked through the underworld, the hero's journey, the rite of passage, you will lack the ability of your unique talents, and the confidence of self that comes from within. In the underground is the breathing heartbeat of the world, the chasm of the resounding resonance, the lowest signal. Find the air to breathe, the way to feel it coursing around, that thumping pulse of the earth, when your fate line can tether to the earth's pole, and always keep your hands touching the web as a link to the endless dragons. The soul of the planet, the ley line of arteries and veins across the meridians of the electromagnetic net that shifts and tunes, vibrates and sizzles in snake-like whipping tendrils, and flashing points of reconnection between severing lightning strikes of thunderous disconnection, and the windswept, war-torn cave of your origin, where your body and shadow understand one another, and the heartstrings of your dreams, the source of your power, are carried in the breathing percussion instrument of your lungs, where the blowing breeze points you to tomorrow, and the ground you step on remains a reminder of the underworld you came from, and the world to walk yet to come. You must descend first into the world, into hell. Face it, charge forth, vanquish the thralls, slay the demon, emerge victorious. Find the artifact of your soul, the fire hidden within. Go low as you can. You can go all the way to hell. Then you step to the surface, arisen and full of storm fury, and eyes lit with stars, and breaths echoing in rhythmic strings of a heart that dance beyond the reality where fingers trace out the path of victory. When you feel yourself as an echo of the great song, and a dreamer in the big dream, following the weirdly worded word of the world. One must learn to walk, the way you wayland across the world, a waylaid wayfinder. Do not fall forward. Do not throw one leg in front and pull yourself to the balance beam of your foot. Do not step by dragging your torso underneath outstretched leg, leaning in awkward shame and downcast posture. Walk by pushing off the world, which can bear the weight of your force, driven from heel to toe, up through calf and thigh, powered by posterior. The march of mankind is to propel the body from its core, a sturdy base. Step by pushing off the earth from your back foot, which will retain balance and forward momentum. The walk is cat-like, lithe. There is a unique gait to each individual, a rhythm of rolling, soft but steady, quiet but sure. Walking is not stiff and rigid, nor stuck in self-conscious stumbles. Pace with dance and flexibility. Flow with the wind while hardy as stone. Crouch crawl, move on all fours, use hands to step, squat walk. Discover methods of movement, shuffle and skip. Scan the horizon and surroundings. Build coordination by trusting your own 2 feet. Leave cryptic tracks, hop and spring, sprint and stomp, stop and go, catch and release. Breathe in the views, taste the path, listen to the pulsing buzz of activity. Then will you find your way, then you will be a waylander. When you emerge mud-stained from the pit you have been wrought, where you have spawned, when your hand first clutches fresh air, pulling yourself up through brambles and untangling the thorny vines, and behold, the mountain which you have in front of you, the one you must move, the same mountain that housed the cave of your beginning. Do not look at such a mountain and be daunted, suddenly shrinking again, wishing to be back in the cave. You have been born. Look at it and shrug. Walk your arrogant walk to the first rock and carry it over. That is how you move mountains, starting with the first stone, and that stone will tell you where to place it. Feel the word, feel the word, feel the word. Skeleton keys and ghost ships. There is always a way. Every puzzle has its key, the lock that prevents progress, barring movement that can be opened. Hidden beneath the surface are layers of shimmering gossamer sheets, drapes that billow in the window where the willow stands by weeping sounds just outside the periphery. There is a realm of shades and shadows, phantom networks where lurk mystery and sage, dark lanes and other dastardly things. It is the place visited by deep sleepers, fey children and lotus eaters, shrouded in suspense and horror, blood and falling leaves. You walk one crisp autumn evening, just as the sun appears as colorful as the changing leaves on the cherry trees. Behold, a headless horseman trots across the path, a foreign passerby flashing briefly before disappearing beyond the horizon, a trick of the eye or play of light or pale rider in the night. Supernatural green glares and spectral blue glows, ghost ships sailing through the gloomy fog of disturbing waters. The window of time is short, sudden and ever-changing. Early morning while the world still sleeps gently. Evening sunsets where the skies are violet and flame-colored and the land bathes in pink and orange. At the dead of midnight, with moon brilliant above and stars reflecting in the bewitching witching hours. The timing has to be precise, the atmosphere distinct, the mood on the edge, caught between shifting from one to the next. Special mystical moments, grotesque, horrifying freeze frames, gripping, confused unreality, dreamlike, timeless treks. Erudition, acquiring great knowledge, expertise and enlightenment. To reach erudition, one must see the ghost ship, spot the headless horseman, watch the dragon soar, the elves escaping into the woods, fairies dancing on the wind, the angels in the glitch, seeing things over the water, secret lights, hidden treasures, the skeleton key that unlocks what is locked behind the mundane. Erudition, that skeleton key is found in unfathomable yearning, ruminating nostalgia, harrowing dread, all-consuming melancholy, awe-inspiring wonder. You must seek them out, the things that make life renewed, a story that sparks the imagination, an adrenaline-fueled adventure, a sight never before seen, a climb up a mountain, a comet blazing across the sky. Let an insect lead you to someplace new, a conversation with an interesting stranger, a dance in the rain. Erudition reveals that the super is really the natural. The skeleton key is the ability to open those obscure moments, being at the right place and time to those once-in-a-lifetime ghost ship moments. Only with the skeleton key it is not once in a lifetime. It is access all the time, in dreams, in random encounters, in day-to-day activity. There is a way to undulate along the winds that bring the ghost ship to bear, allowing you to be like a phantasm moving between the shade cast by the phantom of the unknowable. It's the same skeleton key that, when the timing and rhythm is truly perfect, the position is absolutely aligned, the threads and waves converging right on you, the ghost ship's ghoulish prow barreling directly at you, phases through you, but in using the skeleton key you open the deck door and board it. And you join that skeleton crew, becoming a wraith, a headless horseman, the very role of chance, supernatural, inexplicable encounters that another will witness. You can drift between worlds, bringing glimpses from beyond the dream, opened by the skeleton key, sources of erudition to the realm of others. Still, the spectral underworld is full of mystery and suspense. There is no end to the great expanse of the phantom realm. The roles are many. Some are ferrymen to the dead, some are the guards at the gates, some are dream bringers, and others are life takers, reapers, and psychopomps. The skeleton crew that manages the day's secrets, the placing of trinkets, the hiding of the misplaced, the rearrangement of misfits, the swiping of memory, the planters of doubt, the removers of obstacles and the setters of traps, the tricksters and the haunters, protectors and antagonizers. When night falls, the skeleton crew gets to work, preparing the encounters, puzzles, and rewards, setting the map and rules, and distributing the game creatures for each day. To be a ghost ship is to pass quietly, unnoticed, though not necessarily unseen, but certainly not believed or given much observation. A furtive glance, an unassured check, a superstitious twitch, but little else. You are invisible to the world of day, camouflaged by mundane drudgery, in your dredge, clawing through the peat of society. Ghost shipping is to do the minimum requirements of responsibility while passing through the day. A skeleton crew is the minimal amount of people necessary to keep a ship or operation running. To be a skeleton crew aboard a ghost ship is to be invisible in the mundane, blending in with all the things that are not thought about or interacted with, and in that silent, shimmering obscurity are the strings of a phantom network, the currents whereby the forgotten answers and locked doors and lost treasures are connected via an escape route, a dead-drop zone for clandestine entrances. In order to set these gimmicks of supernatural and restricted troves of prizes of erudition, there are universal codes, tunnels, a skeleton key, a master word that grants access, for one could hardly set a secret sealed room and go out the main door. One would need a master key to the back door, a trap door where the skeletons are kept in the closet. It is the inhabitants of the world, humans, animals, plants, microorganisms, that are the supernatural figures. The gods, the folk creatures, the mythic beasts, the angels and demons, the ghosts and ghouls, the heroes and legends, the trees and rivers, rock and soil, items and totems, fruit and bug. They occupy roles of archetypal status. When one retires, the next takes their place. The ferryman will ferry until the day he cannot go on, and then be relieved of his duty by the next replacement. That's just it, the secret of the archetypes. They become us, and we become them. Although it is ever-changing, ever-evolving, each iteration renewing the dynamics, the zodiacal wheel turns, so it goes. There are rebellions, there are factions, there are families and feared monsters, and newcomers from beyond that shake things up. They are recognizable stories, as the lore of the entire world's heritage works thusly so. The old gods that have refused to let go, the young gods full of pride, the titans banished away, the calamities imprisoned, the spirits of air and water, of fire and earth, of stone and wood are in hiding, locked behind rib-cage frames, opened only by skeleton keys. Like looking into a peephole, the things you aren't supposed to see on the other side. We mix the sea of dreams with the sands of time and the winds of magic across the fire of stories, stories that we share and tell, told to us and retold. Stories we contribute like the old skalds in the night, or bards in the forest, old men in a cabin, or hag in the grove. We are the beings, the keepers of life, the beholders of lore, the descendants of yore. But not only us, the animals and the trees, the land and the sea, the wind and the storms, the diseases and the stars. They are part of the same existence as us, share their stories whose tales tell us our own, and we can share ours with them. We become the characters in the folk forms shaped by our experiences, our trinkets, and wares, and beliefs. Your blood may be its own person, your heart another, while your hands tell their stories, your ankles have their own, and your bones to them. We amalgamate into a mosaic of vignettes, a scrapbook of scrapes, tall tales and legends of how things went. The wizard in the tower, the troll under the bridge, the witch in the woods, the monster behind the curtain, the creature in the dark, the warrior who died in a nameless battle, an ancestor who can give you guidance, the good luck charm and enchanted amulet. We all are the mythology. Pandora's box has a skeleton key, hidden somewhere outside the edge of your awareness that can be found, one that lets out all the trapped monsters in the world. We are the fiction and the fantasy. Become the cryptid, become rage, become storm, become a demon, become the nightmare. Be the headless horseman and the skeleton key dancer, the ghoul and the ghost ship. Answer the riddle, break the seal, glitch through the walls, find the back door, enter the cheat codes, sail through as a ghost ship, trade for the solution, speak the master word, sing the hunting song, quest for the treasure, data mine the daemon, slay the dragon, summon the angel, whistle in the dark, use the skeleton key. Find your skills, your magic, your abilities and talents, hone them sharp. Build your band of comrades to balance each other's weaknesses, then go forth and conquer your enemies. Abide the iron code, to defend the weak against the oppression of the evil strong. The wheel spins, the tables turn, the phoenix rises whether you plan it or not, or plant or don't. There is always a way for solving. Puzzle Planet. Make palaces of your places and castles of your clashes. Make paint of your pains and wonders of your woes. Make stories of your sorries and tales of your talkings. Make mountains to your moons and stars to your suns. Make journeys of your jails and cutlery of your colts. In all things make, for the flight of dreams travels at the speed of light. Plumes of smoke are multiplying in bulbous bursting bubbles of belching ashes in a willow tree wasteland twilight. A shadowy fume figure can almost be seen between vaporous vapid visions. But alas, its mundane marching miasma obscures shade and the space between colorless collage clouds of consumption. Approaches, the silver lining thread of life in the shape of crescent moon, arced like a cruel lifeless drab rainbow, pulls across a billowing cloak made from windy wisps of soot, comes down in the graying, comes across the end, comes the reaper's scythe.